Well, this is it, the penultimate volume. Last time we saw the end of the war for Jürgenschmidt, but Mestianora descended onto Rosemine, severed her memories, Ferdinand quietly took care of Gervasio, all while she ran around for the gods. But now that the immediate threat is over, what's really left for this volume? Quite a bit still needs answered, like who's going to be the next Zent, what's going to happen to the royal family, and probably most importantly of all, how much longer is Rosemine going to have to wait for her library city? Things won't be wrapped up as neatly as we'd hope. But before we go ahead and dive into that, why not hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on content from me? Bookworm might almost be over, but there is still stuff to cover with the short stories collection and such. Yes, I am aware there's a spin-off. I won't be covering it until there's an official English translation. Sorry. I also have merch for sale, so go ahead and show your love for this amazing series. So with those plugs out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into Part 5, Volume 11. Our prologue begins from Ferdinand's perspective. It's right after their dinner meeting with Sylvester and Florencia where Ferdinand scoops Rosemine up and hands her off to her retainers. While she and Charlotte are staying in the dorm and return to their rooms, Sylvester and Florencia are heading back to the castle to prepare for their meeting in a few days with the royals, and Ferdinand plans to head back to the villa. But before he can go, Sylvester and Eustace encourage him to rest there and have some tea in his room. Since Lasfam did go out of his way to prepare some, he hasn't really had a chance to serve his lord in quite some time. Also, there's an annoyance there who clearly has something he wishes to discuss. Yeah, Hartmut is nearby. Fine, with all this pestering, Ferdinand stays for some tea to hear Hartmut out. Though this is clearly a plot to get him to rest in Ehrenfest dorm for the night, that way he gets some actual relaxation instead of heading back to Arnsbach. It is touching that Sylvester cares enough about Ferdinand as his brother to treat him so well, even after he's now so involved in Arnsbach. But at the same time, he does recognize the dude should shape up and cut him off already. In Ferdinand's room, this is Hartmut's first time in an archducal family member's chambers in the academy, since he can't actually go into Rosemine's, so he's looking around pretty curious. But while Eustace and Eckhart head off to go eat their meal so Lasfam can serve tea, they cut to the chase. There are a few things Hartmut wishes to discuss. First, he wants to delay moving Lieseletta and Gresha from Arnsbach until the next day, as it'll be dangerous to move them at night. Why's that? Well, it wasn't said in front of Rosemine, but things aren't exactly safe in Arnsbach. Detlind still has loyalists there, and they are attempting to take her attendants as hostage for leverage. But Letizia is keeping them safe in the northern building for now. I mean, that sounds safe, but also not really. Letizia's retainers aren't the most trustworthy bunch either, and while Ferdinand wishes to observe who's gonna do what to determine how they'll treat Arnsbach's nobles going forward, if harm actually came to Rosemine's retainers, she'd surely go on a rampage and that would just be a hassle. So Ferdinand wants them out of Arnsbach as quickly as possible. The remaining knights in Arnsbach are basically the ones they can't trust, as they took those with them to the academy. Damn. But Hartmut says he and Cornelius will go there tomorrow to fetch their things and escort her attendants. Sure, whatever. Ferdinand agrees because he has bigger concerns. Next, what about the transference ceremony? As they've decided to call it just now, what are Ferdinand's plans? Since Hartmut suspects he'll be the one to execute him, and Ferdinand doesn't really care about the specifics. This is a new ceremony they're inventing whole cloth because the royals have only lost the Gruchicite once in this country's long history, and a divine avatar has never needed to bestow it before. Ferdinand keeps some of the details to himself, since this is a bastardization of the process in the first place, as Zents are meant to get the book with their own power. So this should only ever be a one-off thing. Okay, Hartmut's fine with it being entirely made up, but he still needs to know the specifics. Ferdinand lays out that after they enter, Rosemine will whirl and open the path to the garden in front of all the archdukes. They'll explain what the purpose of the magic circle is, and mostly how Detlind failed to activate it, which will be pretty easy since Rosemine will actually do so. She'll go in, grab the magic tool, return, give it to the Zent they choose, and call it a day. Fantastic. What could possibly go wrong? Now, this is a rough outline as they haven't really talked to the royals yet, and thus major decisions haven't been made. But as long as Rosemine's divinity is burned into the noble population's minds, it's all good. Ferdinand and Hartmut agree on that, but for different reasons. It suits Ferdinand's plans if Rosemine is deemed special, so they get less pushback when she's recognized as the country's first underage daub. However, Hartmut just wants to elevate her as her most loyal devotee. Cool. Rosemine can stop him if he gets too out of hand, since she has his name. Anyway, that's still not the real reason Hartmut wanted to talk to Ferdinand. So, what is it? Hartmut drops the casual smile and asks what the full impact of Mestianora's descent onto Rosemine was. Ferdinand plays it cool here, but Hartmut explains that she proposed using her high beast to get around like it was the most obvious thing, as though she forgot about her face stone phobia entirely. So Ferdinand relays what happened, as much as he's able to at least. He then flashes back to the events in the garden. We find out how happy he was when Mestianora said she was leaving, because she seemed pretty damn disinterested in returning to the world of the gods. But he didn't voice that thought. Probably a good idea. He at least recognizes how much he's done to piss her off, because based on the old stories, Mestianora owes Yverman pretty much everything, as it's thanks to him that her mother and her mother's subordinates all survived her father. But why does she hate Ferdinand? Well, he barged in, got the wisdom, and then refused to dye the foundation. If the country dries out, Yverman will disappear with it, and her malice is pretty apparent when she tells Gervasio to call out as well, because Ferdinand's voice isn't likely to reach mine. She's even lightly crushing him with her divine power at this point, and explains she severed Rosemine's memories. Was that necessary? No, apparently. She did it to make Rosemine's body easier to control, but she was so thrilled to visit Mestianor's library, she didn't even really need to do it. However, Rosemine did ask a goddess for help, and sacrifices should be made. Could be worse, but she explains that those who channeled their mana into her should be able to reconnect her memories of them. But would Ferdinand be so cruel to do that against someone's will? Have you met the guy? Yeah, Ferdinand has zero reservations about that, as he's already dyed Rosemine before, but what about commoners? Mestianora laughs and hits back that she won't even tell him if that's possible, meaning it definitely is, because if it wasn't, she would have told him as much to make him suffer. So when Rosemine hits the ground, he tries and pushes his mana into her, but it's rebounding due to Mestianora's influence. Damn, if only he had a synchronization potion on him, but why the hell would he even carry that into battle? Exactly, so he didn't. Eventually he overpowers the mana enough to make a connection, and that's when his voice actually reaches her. The point of this retelling is to show just how annoyed Ferdinand is at Mestianora's meddling in the world of man, so he tells Hartmut there's little he can actually say about the goddess. Besides, how would Hartmut react to Mestianora using Rosemine's body as she pleases? Probably not great. But to be honest, even Ferdinand doesn't know how much of her memory is gone. Everyone in the room does know about her commoner past, so Ferdinand says likely most of her missing memories are linked to the lower city, though apparently some of her negative ones are missing too. That's good to know. Hartmut's a bit crushed to learn that she ranks him lower than Books, but as some solace, he assumes that Ferdinand also ranked lower than Books. Yeah, let's just let him think that. Anyway, while there are some theories to test, Ferdinand is too short on time, and it'll have to wait until after the transference ceremony is over. But Ferdinand does forbid her retainers from speaking about her memory loss to her, as they can't exactly have her emotions going wild under the goddess's influence. It's a pain to deal with, but that mana will put them above the royals in status to the rest of Jürgenschmidt. Rosemine's already emotional as is, and could probably crush people without actually meaning to, but Hartmut does have a suggestion, because apparently her namesworn feel the same sense of awe as everyone else, but their hands don't tremble when touching her. Fantastic. So they have some countermeasures in place. If she gets out of hand during the negotiations, Sylvester can call them in from a nearby room to throw some silver cloth over her. That'll block the mana. And with that, Hartmut takes his leave. Ferdinand then looks to his namesworn and asks them if they're ready for what's to come, and they all agree without hesitation, all while he palms his own namestone that Rosemine returned already in his pocket. We have pretty much everyone's perspective on that event in the Garden of Beginnings now. We can see just how differently they each viewed it. Welcome to the end of the story, where Ferdinand works his ass off to ensure that Rosemine's life returns to normal, enough so that he's willing to put his own life and the country on the line. Back over to Rosemine's perspective, she gets word the next day that Lieseletta and Gresha are coming to the dorm after getting them out of Arensbach, so she goes to the tea party room to pick them up while greeting the Arensbach Knights. Her retainers are all taking turns fetching their luggage from the castle there, so Rosemine tells them to keep an eye on Letizia and make sure she's okay. Lieseletta and Gresha tell her she's doing good though, and took care of them while she was away. Good to know. Though they were pretty shocked when they saw Rosemine without any silver cloth for the first time. Anyway, the next few days were pretty uneventful. Rosemine whirled and studied the crap from Ferdinand so she could be the perfect goddess avatar for their negotiations. And by the time of the negotiations, a new outfit arrives from Ehrenfest, made with the cloth from Arensbach given to her by Ferdinand and dyed in the current style. That and the hairpin from Tulia are both impressive, which, That sends a wave of panic through Rosemind, as she feels like she should probably know this Thule person based on the context, but she's drawing a massive blank on her face. I mean, she had to have met this person when placing the order before, right? Now, she can picture the rest of Corina's personnel, so why not Thule? Is that important or not? Oh yeah, Mestinora messed with her mind, so maybe this is the consequence of lending her body to a goddess. Though she's worried, she pushes it from her mind by being optimistic that her memories are still knocking about up there, and that she can probably recover them somehow. So she goes to meet Ferdinand after getting word about his arrival at the tea party room, and asks him about it as soon as she sees him. Hey, he already has a sound blocker down too. Pretty convenient. She tells him that some of her memories are missing, like of the person who made her hairpin for example, and he simply says he suspected as much. She likely can't remember who dyed her cloth either, despite making her a Renaissance. Yeah, total blank there too. So does he know about this? Yeah, he does. But it's not important right now. Well, it is to her. She's missing her memories. But before she can throw a fit, Ferdinand calms her down by saying Mestinora severed her memories of anything greater than her love of books. The people she's missing memories of right now are commoners in Ehrenfest. They're pretty far away from any of the current trouble going on. Basically, she's not going to meet them anytime soon, so she can wait until after a new Zent is crowned, and then Ferdinand will help her fix her memories. And that puts her at ease. So Dunkelfelger arrives first and greets Rosemind, as she's seated farthest away from the door. Also, she isn't to stand up, as she is the highest status person in the room, ranking above even the royals, because everyone is supposed to greet her, which pretty much throws her off. She's used to greeting people rather than being greeted. Ferdinand is standing next to her, looking like her retainer, but he can't exactly sit either, as that would actually be rude. Okay, so this is all pretty complicated. All Dunkelfelger and Sieglinde approach and ask for Mestinora to bless their duchy, but Rosemind informs them she's not in right now. Yeah, this seems excessive, but it's pretty obvious nobles would pay their respects to her goddess-dyed mana, and not Rosemind herself. And this is why Ferdinand informed her not to get too carried away, as anything she says at this point would be assumed to have divine authority, and pretty much be taken as law. Neat. Anyway, they still don't stand even after hearing that it's just Rosemind there, because Sieglinde wonders how things are gonna go, since her husband might become Zent if the royals don't pass muster in this meeting, and Rosemind's also curious. Speaking of, that's when they enter. Traurqual looks like shit, but is only marginally worse than the rest of the royals, and Hildebrand has his hands in some unseasonably warm fur muffs to keep them hidden. Eglantine and Adolfina being there are expected, but Magdalena is a bit of a surprise, as she's a third wife. Though because she led the charge, she got an invitation as well. Plus Hildebrand is kind of a topic for discussion. He's gonna need a guardian there. They kneel before Rosemind asking for a blessing, but she instead says she wishes to reward them for their hard work, and tries to give Sigiswald back his courtship necklace, simply insisting it was just a symbol of authority. When he tries to correct her, Ferdinand jumps in to tell her not to touch it with her bare hands, but it's too late. The necklace crumbles to gold dust in an instant, and she tries to pass that off, saying gold dust dyed with the goddess's mana is probably pretty valuable, at least as a brewing ingredient, right? That's when Sigiswald decides to save some face and go along with her little story. Ferdinand then asserts his role as her fiancé now, by touching her hairpin and saying how much he envies Sigiswald for goddess-dyed gold dust. So, he's for sure touching the hairpin he made her, right? The one that's not crumbling to gold dust at the moment, despite the fact that she's having trouble touching most magic tools? So is he begging for ingredients, or is he just flexing on Sigiswald? Knowing Ferdinand, probably a little bit of both. Anyway, she moves this along by saying she'll provide the mana if he provides the ingredients, even if he is shamelessly begging in front of the royals, which seems to please him. So with that, they eat lunch before launching into the big meeting. Hildebrand has his muffs removed, where we see he has a stop-sealing bracelet on, since he broke the rules by getting it early. That tugs at Rosemind's heartstrings, like when Wilfried was manipulated, but Eglantine seems to be watching Rosemind closely. What's that all about? Well, we'll hear about it later. They chat about the battles they experienced, Traurqual's multiple wash-ins to rid him of Trug, and how Rosemind's big one in the auditorium washed it off the knights to clear their heads too once the battle was dying down. The royals have gotten a lot of questions about what exactly's happened in the academy, but they haven't responded to any of the duchies yet. Once this meeting finishes, they plan to compile a report to distribute to the various obs prior to the conference. Yeah, Rosemind's really in the thick of it at this point. Once they've eaten though, they get down to business, where she kicks things off by saying first they need to decide who will be the next Zent. Sigiswald interrupts to say to give the Gruchicite to his father, but Adolfina shuts him down by saying it's rude to interrupt those who rank above him. This is probably the first time he's ever met somebody who ranks above him or his father, so dude's hit with a pretty big dose of reality. He apologizes and then urges her to continue. As it turns out, the royals haven't been supplying the actual foundation from the palace replenishment hall, and the gods want a true Zent who can dye said foundation. That floors them, as what the hell have they been killing themselves supplying then? Their replenishment hall connects to the Sovereign Temple's prayer hall, which further connects to the replenishment hall in the Royal Academy, and then finally goes to the foundation. The tool that does all that though, requires mana itself, so very little has actually been reaching the country's foundation, and as a result, it's nearly out of mana. But before Sigiswald can insist they hand the book over again, Rosemine clarifies that whoever becomes Zent will need to heed the gods' demands. Though in actuality, some of these are just hers and Ferdinand's. So what are these conditions? Fill the foundation immediately, let the Lanzanavians into Jürgenschmidt, no killing as punishment for the rebellion, and future Zents will need to obtain the book the old-fashioned way. Wait, really? The gods expect them to accept the people who attacked them as nobles? Yeah, no Jürgenschmidt noble is gonna go along with that, even if the gods ordered it. But that's a bit of a misconception. They're under no obligation to take them in as nobles. In fact, they can slap some stop-sealing handcuffs on them and treat them as mana batteries as far as the gods are concerned. But won't that just breed a generation of resentment? Yeah, the royals probably think that because they were taught that mass executions were how to solve that issue, but that's what got them into this mess. Those exact executions have led to the current state of affairs, with a mana shortage and the resentment in the lower ranking and fallen duchies. So Rosemine tells them that if they can't see the reality of that, they're all lost causes. I mean, she's not wrong, she just finally has enough authority to say it to their faces. That said, while Sylvester is gawking at her audacity, she reiterates her desire for a royal to take the throne still, as that would cause the least amount of friction among the upper-ranked duchies. But they promised Everman they would return the country to its old ways, since the current political climate is a distorted mess. So, what are those old ways? Good question. So she explains to the royals what needs to happen. The royal family as it stands will need to be abolished, and the Zents must be chosen from those who obtain a Book of Mestianora once more. Whoever takes the throne will need to return the Sovereign Temple to the Academy, since it's always been Jürgenschmidt's Holy Land, and also serve as the High Bishop. Oh, and don't complain, because they tried to get her to serve as the High Bishop not long ago. Pretty much everyone there but her and Ferdinand had their souls leave their body by this point, yet she presses on. The villas will need to be sealed as they were created by a Zent who feared assassination, and the new Zent will have to live off taxes from all the duchies rather than the sovereignty's taken land. That's all going to be returned. So, who volunteers? Not many takers, since even becoming Zent would mean their lives are getting turned upside down. It won't be like how they're used to living. But she does sweeten the deal. They'll try to sweep as many of their crimes under the rug as possible, and all the remaining royals can take up the vacant seats as obs of the fallen duchies. If not though, they're gonna publish the unfiltered truth, forcing the current royals into ivory towers to serve as mana batteries alongside the Lanzanavians, while Ob Dunkelfelger takes the throne. Hell, Roderick's already writing the glorious tale of his true Ditter game to turn the man into a goddamn hero. Well, he's stoked and ready to buy all the copies then, but his wife reins him in, while Ferdinand chastises Rosemine for her bluntness. The country is going to resent the royals for their failure if the truth is published. They'll get 2 meals and a whole book to read in prison. How generous. Eglantine speaks up, asking what's changed here, because the last time they spoke about candidates from other duchies with the whole Det Lyn debacle, Ferdinand and Rosemine shot that down as a bad idea. So why are they saying that's a preferable outcome now when that'll likely bring about war in the future? Oh, simple. Because when Ferdinand told them about it, he assumed they would go and get the damn book. But after a year, not a single one has even tried, and they expected Rosemine to get it for them. Yeah, Ferdinand is taking aim at Eglantine here since she's the closest to getting it in the royal family, and Sylvester is pissed too when he realizes they were relying on her, as the adoption was meant to be a last resort. No, turns out, that was just their plan A. Ferdinand is absolutely livid the royals pulled this crap after Rosemine promised to protect Ehrenfest in his stead, when he left to avoid causing issues at Trauerqual's orders. Magdalena speaks up, but Trauerqual admits that he was in the wrong here, and Sylvester's interested now as well, since he was kept out of that discussion. But since Trauerqual promised Ferdinand he wouldn't tell a soul what they agreed upon, they leave it at that. But look, nothing says the royals can't hold power by producing suitable heirs. have their kids get the most completed books, and basically keep the royal family alive through meritocratic means. Though that won't be easy after they publicize how to get a book of Mestianora. Rosemine then explains how the Zent selection process has warped over time to those there, but I'm gonna skip it, because we've already heard. Sigiswald offers to be Zent, since the country is expecting him to be the next king anyway, but everyone quickly sees that he's not really fit for the job. Yeah, while he's paying lip service to doing the god's bidding, he's still trying to shift blame onto Ferdinand for not keeping an eye on Det during this mess. But that was a bad move. Rosemine sees he's not used to being in this position, and Ferdinand's already giving him a dazzling smile. But as Sigiswald clarifies that he's blaming Ferdinand for this rebellion, she snaps and goes off on him. It was their royal decree that put him to work in Arnsbach and wouldn't even let him leave despite the delayed marriage. Yeah, it was because of them that he ended up poisoned and then had to rush into battle to defend their lazy asses without any rest. Without him, Lanzanov would have gotten the foundation, and Ob Dunkelfelger backs them up, saying in all honesty, he overperformed for being a mere fiancé to Det Lind. Hell, the royals had ample warning from Ehrenfest and Dunkelfelger about this trouble, but mostly ignored it. Worse, they acted with their own safety in mind, but Ferdinand tells her to call it there, because while she's going off on Sigiswald, she's actually crushing the entire royal family and also everyone else there with her divine power. Even Ferdinand's in pain. Trauerqual brings some clarity that they've already agreed to not punish Ferdinand, so it's basically a moot point, and thus she's able to stop crushing everyone. Sigiswald's an idiot who doesn't know his place. Still. Ferdinand is looking worried, even after her eyes return to normal color. But why? Well, she can't control her goddess-dyed mana, and if it gets out of hand, who knows if she'll even be Rosemine anymore. That's scary, but that thought alone is enough to make her mana run rampant, and she crushes everyone once more. This time though, she's completely out of control. He tries to calm her again, but that just stresses her out more that he's getting hurt by getting close to her. So she smacks his hand away, trying to protect him from her crushing by putting distance between them. But this sight actually reminds her the first time she crushed Bezewanst and him by entering the temple. She was protecting people then too. She can't remember who, just that she's breaking a promise. And that causes her to spiral with worse and worse crushing. Ferdinand signals Sylvester to call in Hartmut, and her namesworn burst in with barely enough chance for the Ordnance to fly to them. They swiftly make a perimeter around her to prevent her mana from passing, and Gresha covers her with a silver cloak Lieseletta made. It covers pretty much everything but her face, so her mana can't leak out nearly as much. But aren't they getting hurt too? Well, no. Hartmut tells her that while they feel her mana strongly, they aren't affected by the crushing aspect of it. That's awesome. After she's covered and calms down a bit, Ferdinand has her do some healing to fix up the royals, because they were starting to spurt blood, and that allows their discussion to finally move forward. But wait, why didn't they just do this from the start? Well, the silver cloth does invoke memories of Lanzanov, so probably would have given the wrong impression here. Also, the royals deserved it. That seems drastic, that they were willing to hurt the royals, but it made their case easier that they do actually rank above them. Anyway, if she's feeling anxious, Ferdinand gives her a sound blocker and a white box to drain her mana into if she's still emotional. What's in it? Well, she can't even open the box because it immediately shrinks down into a white cocoon. What the hell? Dude just gave his name like that. Yeah, now he won't be affected by her mana either. But damn if this doesn't keep distorting the idea of name swearing like Bonifatius warned her about. That doesn't make her feel too good. Besides, she doesn't want a master-servant relationship with Ferdinand, so he tells her to keep it until her divinity fades, that way he can reach her too. She was also the one who started this, abusing his namestone to save his life anyway, so this is basically just the logical conclusion as far as he's concerned. And with that, he takes his seat once again. So was that Ferdinand's only reason for giving his name, so he wouldn't be affected by Rosemine's mana? No, of course not. Ferdinand has a scheme, and it's pretty damn subtle because it actually serves multiple purposes. Back to the topic at hand before Rosemine lost control. Is Sigiswald going to be Zent? Trauerqual and Ralfrida seem to have some reservations, but Sigiswald says he's the logical choice. The country is expecting him to be Zent, right? Rosemine throws in that whoever becomes Zent will need to sign a contract with the Goddess of Light and Goddess of Order to ensure that they don't go back on their deal to dismantle the royal family and set the country right. And with Dunkelfelger backing that idea up, it's pretty much set in stone. But Ferdinand isn't quite done. He tells Sigiswald that if he wants to take the throne, he'll have to stand on stage with Rosemine, so he should give his name too to ensure that he's not affected by her divine mana. Whoa, what? Now a contract makes sense, but the Zent giving his name to someone due to be an Ob? What nonsense is that? Oh hey, Phase 2 of the Lord of Evil's plan was just set in motion. Sigiswald calls that out, but before Ferdinand can respond, Traurqual actually steps up and binds his son in light for his stupidity. He states the obvious, that they would normally be executed instead of given the chance to rule the country still. The fact that they even have a future is a miracle, and Sigiswald needs to see the light like the rest of them already have. So, that settles it. Sigiswald is out, by his own father no less. Okay, but they still need a Zent, so who? Traurqual is again offered the chance, but he refuses outright. He's holding to that only those who obtain the book with their own power can rule, and he rightly points out after kneeling before him that Ferdinand ascended the altar and disappeared with the divine avatar, so he asks him right there in front of everyone if he too has a Grutricite. Anastasius causes a scene trying to get his father to stop kneeling before someone lower in status than him, but Traurqual is adamant that he is not a true Zent, and this all plays out exactly like Ferdinand scripted. So he clears the air before everyone assumes that he has a Grutricite, and says the requirement for ascending the altar is the divine protection for all the primary gods, to which Eglantine confirms, as she did it herself. Also, she adds that since Ferdinand pointed them in that direction in the first place, he either has it, or he stopped just short of getting it. So, she's clearly onto Ferdinand's plot, but while Traurqual and Eglantine are looking to Ferdinand for an answer, he simply responds that Sigiswald is truly his son. That's not a compliment, considering Traurqual just called him an idiot a second ago. And hey, Magdalena takes offense to that line in her husband's stead. But Ferdinand clarifies that he told him he didn't want to be Zent in the first place, which is why he agreed to an engagement with Detlind and slaved away in Arensbach for a year and a half, and nearly died. That hasn't changed. So Sylvester's now getting what was actually discussed between those two back in part 4, and he's pretty pissed off. But Eglantine gets them back on track once more. Ferdinand's not accepting the king's proposition to take the throne, as him doing so would cause another civil war most likely. But Rosemine brings some much needed reality to this discussion. The royals have essentially deified the Grutricite at this point. Just getting one isn't going to give them a pass to implement whatever changes they want. She's learned over the course of this entire series that people will complain if she makes changes too quickly, so she thinks they need to go slow with the reforms through this new Zent. So you'll probably notice the theme at this point, as Eglantine points out that Ferdinand and Sigiswald are off the table, so she addresses Traurqual and says that he can obtain the book now. So does he want to give being a proper Zent a shot? And the dude refuses outright, having been beaten down for over a decade of abuse after a traumatic civil war. Okay, so he's out too. That leaves one last option, herself. So Eglantine, after dodging the throne for the past 17 books, says she'll be the next Zent. This is after the name swearing and contract magic were brought up, so she knows what she's in for. And Anastasius isn't too happy she's taking this up, but she explains, had Traurqual wanted it, she would have supported him, though she knew his reign would have been short-lived. Anastasius and Hildebrand lacked the elements to ascend the altar, so they were never even in the running, and hell, had Ferdinand wanted it, she wouldn't have opposed him either, since Rosemine loves him so much. Now hold the phone, blah blah blah, she loves him like family, right? There's no romantic feelings here. That grinds the conversation to a halt because, is she serious right now? She asks Ferdinand to step in and correct this misunderstanding, but he's oddly silent. Sylvester teases him in turn, but that awkward moment can wait, because Eglantine was kind of onto something here. Basically, she recognizes that she's the only choice left. I mean, she would rather live with her daughter, cleaning up the royal family's messes over her life, than being in a cell and never seeing her again, so there really wasn't even a choice. Oh, that's the first time Rosemine's heard that she has a daughter. Mazel tov. So as long as Anastasius supports her, she sees no reason to oppose Eglantine becoming Zent. But how is he gonna do that exactly? Well, the same way a husband to an Ob would support his wife, meaning Anastasius had better get circling them shrines to become omni-elemental. Yeah, a husband to a queen doesn't actually need a Book of Mestianora. As stated right here, it wouldn't hurt, but it's not needed. Okay, with Eglantine settled as the next Zent, they can start covering up the royals' misdeeds. And first is Hildebrand getting his stop early. Little dude should probably get a stop sealing ring until he enrolls in the academy, and then he can take it off after his classmates get theirs in their 3rd year. Magdalena is surprised to hear that, but even Ferdinand plays a compassion by saying he was tricked. Yeah, it's pretty fair that no one would have been on guard against Raublu, but clearly his education was lacking if he didn't listen to why the age for obtaining stops was raised, and that's her failure as a parent. Nice callback to when she railed against Ferdinand for being a shit teacher. But hey, Trauerqual is going to be an ob, so little dude will probably make a good Archduke candidate if he learns from his uncle and cousins. Hildebrand speaks up, asking if he could become Zentstill one day once the method is published. And I mean, she tries to give him a little bit of hope, but Ferdinand makes damn sure that doesn't happen. The kid fucked up his life by getting his stop early. Yeah, he was compressing his mana at an early age, but he still lacks the elements, and he won't have a stop of any higher quality than the kids in the current generation. On top of that, he'll be at a disadvantage as his mana growth could outpace his stop, making him unable to control his mana like Rosemine did. She seems fine now though, and yeah, that's because she was Omni-Elemental from the start and entered the shrines. Hildebrand can't do that. That's the Ferdinand we all know and love, thoroughly crushing a child's hopes and dreams for no reason. Everyone there but Ferdinand feels bad for him, and they have to have his retainers take him out of the room since he's actually crying. The night may be young, but they still have a mountain of things to discuss. They have a new Zent, so now it's time to divvy up the rewards and decide what they're gonna do with all these criminals they've got. So Rosemine tells Trauerqual to let Sigiswald up since he's still bound in light. She still recognizes that he technically ranks above her, and her real reasoning is that punishing him wouldn't be fair to his wives, as they'd have to face it too. Though Sigiswald is lacking in the education department, major understatement there, she assumes that Adolfina and his other wife can make up for his shortcomings. Yeah, Adolfina's not too thrilled about this, and asks if him becoming an Archduke of a deposed duchy would be too much for him to handle. But he didn't commit any crime, so why not? He'll learn pretty quick on how to carry himself, or actually face some punishment when Eglantine takes the throne, which is why they need to hurry this process along in the first place. Rosemine's mana won't be dyed forever, and she also can't really act as ob with it, due to the fact that she can't even brew registration brooches. Basically, if they put the transference ceremony off until the conference, like they're suggesting they do, Arnsbach won't be able to participate at all. So that is to say, all the heavy lifting for this is going to be done by Anastasius. At least they throw him a bone and lend him Hartmut, though a prince taking orders from an archnoble isn't exactly ideal. The alternative is Blue Priest, so he'll take Hartmut to the temple to prepare for the ceremony as much as he's loath to go. While the temple still has a negative association right now, no one will bat an eye once they reveal where the foundations are located, the temple's key and Bible's purpose, and also this is a great opportunity to return the Blue Priest to their home duchies. They're planning to send the sovereign nobles back home for a bit too while they restructure, but the idea is that Eglantine and Anastasius' retainers will be handling the bulk of the workload, so Blue Priest won't really be necessary, which hey, frees up their budget a bit. So Eglantine will be moving to the Royal Academy once their temple is fixed up, but where exactly will she live? Oh, that's easy. There's this fully furnished villa on the grounds that was prepared for Rosemine. Yikes, Ferdinand's telling her to take the Adelgisa villa? Yeah, basically, but they will have to do a remodel to make it more suitable for a queen. Plus, they're gonna need to remove the teleporter to Arnsbach in it. That's a given. Okay, so next they tell Eglantine she's gonna need to dye the foundation immediately after getting the book, because they'll have to redraw the duchy borders before the conference anyway. Which, adding on to that list, she'll have to capture Gervasio as well. Why her and not Rosemine or Ferdinand? Well, think about it, she has nothing to her name in this fight, so capturing the enemy leader will justify her role as Zent. He's been locked in a country gate for about 3 days at this point, and is probably pretty weakened. Still, they suggest they take around 10 nights to take him down. Unless they don't need to search his memories to convict anyone at least. Ferdinand got specific confirmation from Mestianora that death by natural causes was okay, so they do have the option to starve him out, though Ferdinand recommends that Eglantine views his memories, as he knows a lot about how to obtain a book of Mestianora, and that'll be beneficial to her as the next Zent. While they don't expect Eglantine to get a book of Mestianora, she is probably going to need to know how, if they want to teach their kids on how to get it so that they can keep the royal family in power in a meritocracy. But searching Gervasio's memories? Yeah, that's not going to be fun. That's when Ferdinand jumps up and presents Giuffredo's medal to Eglantine. It's her job to dispose of it as the next Zent. But she asks if they shouldn't negotiate with Lanzanov first. Well, that's her call, but Ferdinand advises against it. Lanzanov clearly views Jürgen Schmidt nobles as just face stones, and having dealt with them firsthand, it's best to leave them to their own devices. Any delegates they send are likely to be imprisoned or just outright killed for their face stones, and Rosemine jumps up to say that she flat out refuses to even open the gate or send Arnsbach nobles there. But if Eglantine wants to send some sovereign nobles, they're gonna have to front the money for the ships, because they're likely not coming back. Sigiswald is confused, as he assumed that since they couldn't kill the prisoners, they'd just be sending them back to Lanzanov as they'd be a security risk down the line, but they can't. The gods made it clear that all those coming to Jürgenschmidt with mana must be accepted. The mass executions after the Civil War are still fresh on the country's mind, so how will they punish the Lanzanovians in a way to satisfy those who lost family and friends? Rosemine has an idea. They'll destroy their stops like they did with Gervasio. It's not pleasant, but they won't be nobles anymore at that point, and it won't run afoul of the gods. From there, they can live their lives as mana batteries for the various duchies, but the details of who gets how many can be decided at a later date. It's not something they need to figure out right now. This brings up the redrawing of the map, so Ferdinand makes one with his Stab real quick and explains that the Zent is meant to only directly control the very center circle of the country, basically the Royal Academy, and that's it. What they have now was carved out from duchies for villas in the palace, so they're gonna need to give that back to the Obs when the borders are redrawn. Charcoal will take Arnsbach's part of Old Workstock, Schaufer, and the southern portion of the sovereignty to create a new greater duchy. Sigiswald will take Old Trostwerk and the northern part of the sovereignty to make another greater duchy. The fallen duchies under the management of the winners can thus be incorporated into their duchies proper too. So does Dunkelfelger want to take their portion of Old Workstock and incorporate it into their duchy while they have the chance? Or are they going to refuse? And at this point, they've taken the nobles in, so they agree to accept it as part of Dunkelfelger officially. However, since they were such big players in this victory, Eglantine asks what else they can do for him. And they do have one request, to always be at least one rank above Klausenberg as long as she's Zent, with the expectation that Klausenberg's influence is gonna grow, as Eglantine is originally from that duchy. Somewhat, they didn't contribute shit to this war, so Dunkelfelger is securing their advantage. And Eglantine's cool with it. As for Ehrenfest, they could take some of Old Zausengaus technically as they do border it, but Sylvester doesn't want land. What do they want as their reward? Something pretty modest. They want to keep their compensation for Rosemine's adoption despite that not happening now. I mean, she's a divine avatar, and Trauerqual's about to become an Ob. It makes no sense, and Trauerqual is completely on board with that. All that's left is for Rosemine's Arnsbach. What's their request? Rosemine just wants Eglantine's help in making her library city. Any books made with the spread of printing should have copies sent to her new home. Is that really all she wants? Yeah, and just be happy she didn't demand Zent-level teleportation circles set up across the country to get her books faster. They dodged a bullet there. Sounds like everything's settled, right? What's left? Oh, nothing much. Just Adolfina wants a divorce. Wait, why? That's a stupid question, assuming you read her side story in Volume 5. But she has her out finally, so she's taking it. See, Sigiswald isn't going to be Zent anymore, and this is technically a breach of their marriage contract. Oh right, marriages in this world are just contracts between two people enforced by the goddess of light. Juanchel isn't going to gain anything of value from their union, so it's causing issues. I mean, Klausenberg and Dunkelfelger got more land for their aid in the Civil War, but Juanchel was on the other side of the country, so they couldn't gain anything like that. They instead send droves of archnobles to the sovereignty to gain influence there. If nobles are indeed being sent back and the sovereignty's land is actually shrinking, Eglantine's rule will leave Juanchel with nothing to show as winners of the Civil War. In fact, they're actually losing out in this deal. So why is she bringing this up? Because Rosemine did their marriage in such a flashy way, she wants to make sure there isn't some special sort of divorce for this. Ferdinand's pretty insistent this has nothing to do with them, but Rosemine speaks up and tells Eglantine, Sigiswald, and Trauerqual to think over what they can do for Juanchel. Not smart for her to insert herself, as that seems like a divine order, but she doesn't regret it. It will need to be discussed during the Archduke conference between their two families. So did Rosemine's crazy ceremony come with any strings attached? After a quick consultation with her in-universe wiki, no, the normal form of divorce still works. But both she and Sigiswald will have a harder time receiving the Supreme God's blessings. It's gonna require twice as much mana as before. But while Rosemine looked that up, Sigiswald begged her to stay. But for what reason? Dude has treated her like garbage since they got married, and while she does dress this up, she basically says she's taking this chance to get away from his sorry ass while she can. Wow, that's 2 strikes for the bookless wonder. Good for her. Sigiswald's a shallow garbage person, and Adolfina deserves better. So that basically wraps up their meeting. Ferdinand informs Eglantine they'll hold the ceremony in 4 days, as it should only take her 3 to finish her namestone, but that's a shocker. Coming from Ferdinand, that's actually pretty generous, and he even admits he wanted to hold it in 2 days, but Rosemine's whirling still isn't up to snuff, and she'll need more practice to stand beside Eglantine. That makes sense now. Eglantine still has her graduation outfit she can wear, though Ferdinand tells her to wear face-stone shoes to ensure it's easier to pour mana into the circle while whirling. And Rosemine's gonna wear her High Bishop robes. Obviously, it's a ceremony, but she doesn't have to wear face-stone shoes as she's putting out enough mana, it won't even matter right now. Though she does still decide to. With that, Rosemine tells Dunkelfelger to bring Hannelore along since she promised to let her watch off the handing of the Grutrasite. But Traurqual likes that suggestion enough that he wants to extend it to all Archduke candidates in the Academy. But hey, why stop there? Sylvester wants all baptized Archduke candidates. That way he can bring Melchior to see his beloved big sister's big ceremony. Is that really okay? Probably, considering the apprentice Blue Robes attend ceremonies back in Ehrenfest. Anyone who misbehaves will only reflect poorly on the archdukes that allowed them to come. So, that's a filter in of itself. With the meeting actually over, she talks to her retainers about what happened. While Hartmut helps Anastasius, Ferdinand has him leave the Sovereign Temple's key with Rosemine. Yeah, he's had it since Ferdinand took it away from Emmanuel last volume. She dishes out work from there, with people fetching her ceremonial robes, getting Felina to deliver a manuscript for the upcoming ceremony to the Rosemine workshop, and comforts Roderick about him not having to rush to finish his newest book about the recent war, since Dunkelfelger isn't taking the throne. Good on him, now he can take his time. But now that her retainers have their orders, Ferdinand takes a seat and has a pretty damn important question. What are they gonna do with Letizia? Could they send her back home to Druanchel? Unlikely. She was actually baptized in Arensbach, and they would need to find a way to nullify her adoption contract when both of her adopters are dead. But even if they could, Druanchel probably won't even take her back. She caused problems in Arensbach after all, so she's a disgrace. Plus, they're already flush with Archduke candidates in that duchy, with a swarm of nobles about to return. The only way Ferdinand could see her returning would be if they wanted to make a connection to Rosemine, since she's taken such a liking to Letizia, which means she'd be a weakness in Druanchel more than anything. Rosemine asks if he thinks it's best for her to stay in Arensbach then, but she also wants to make him at ease if he wants to avoid Letizia, since she poisoned him and all. However, Ferdinand wants to confirm her intentions on how she'll treat the children of those killed and imprisoned in this conflict. And her idea is to do what they did with the kids from Ehrenfest's Purge. House them in the temple, and she'll be their guardian. So, Ferdinand says leave Letizia to him. That's worrying, but he confirms that he won't do anything she'll hate. Besides, she has his name. She can just order him not to hurt Letizia. As much shit as that poor girl's been through, you really just want her to have a happy ending at the end of all of this. So it's nice to see that Rosemine and Ferdinand are looking out for her. With that decided, he has her wrapped in more silver cloth and they rush out with her name sworn following. But they're all men, so Judith raises a fuss to try and follow along. However, Clarissa's there too. Since she can come, Judith is out. But what's all this about? He's trying to test how much her divine power fades when she uses it, and for that purpose, he takes her to the library of all places. Why the library? You'll see. In front of the statue of Mestianora that took her to Iverman and burned the magic circle for the Grutrasite into her mind, it all starts to kinda make sense. He hands her a sound blocker and brings her fully up to speed. He was gonna die the country's foundation himself, but due to the drastic changes in her mana from Mestianora's influence, he's currently recognized as Ob Arensbach and can't. Yeah, that's the actual reason he was able to use the teleportation magic circle in the villa, not because he was registered to the mana replenishment hall and using a face stone with her mana. He wants her to empty out as much mana as she can to feel better, since Jürgen Schmidt's foundation is massive. He also didn't want Hartmut wearing the key around Anastasius, since this upcoming ceremony is going to put her status above the royals in front of the whole country. Things might get dangerous after that, especially once the importance of the keys are revealed. So he tells her to insert the key into a keyhole after opening the book, and sure enough, the foundation is several times bigger than Arensbach's, and almost completely empty, which explains why Iverman was panicking so much. Here she can dump in enough mana to not feel sick after she built up so much during her outburst earlier, but even after all of that, it's still only a sixth of the way full. 4 days later, she's gotten passing marks from Ferdinand on her whirling, and her attendants are getting her dressed for her big day. They load her with charms and a new one that's a bit strange. There's some intricate chain-link gloves with a boatload of rainbow face stones on them. Ferdinand went all out on these, meaning he's surely gotten almost no sleep. Was this really necessary? Yes it is, because it'll prevent Mestianora from descending into her once again. Neat. They race off to the waiting room, where Eglantine and Anastasius kneel before her when she enters. Things are pretty damn hectic right now with the final checks in case Roblut had any more co-conspirators left in the order, but also none of the Obs know the details of today's ceremony except for Dunkelfelger. Most are wondering why Trauerqual isn't the one getting the book. But before this thing even starts, Hartmut has them all move to the back of the room where Eglantine can give her name. Anastasius isn't thrilled here, and Rosemine sees why. Her mana is almost exactly like Ferdinand's normally, and it's gonna go back to that as soon as she's rid of Mestianora's influence. That won't feel great around his wife, right? Rosemine's kinda there with him, because she doesn't really want to do this either. I guess it's necessary because of her goddess-dyed mana or whatever. Eglantine hands over her stone, and Rosemine pours her mana in as fast as possible to prevent her from feeling pain, though Eglantine does still groan. Anastasius tries to rush to her side, but Hartmut actually stops him, saying everyone felt pain upon giving their names, but it hurts worse the bigger the gap is in mana. Eglantine is likely feeling the least of her name sworn, but when it finishes, Rosemine asks if she's okay, and Eglantine puts on her perfect noble smile and thanks her for her consideration. Man, ask this girl 4 years ago if she thought she'd be name sworn to a girl 5 years her junior and also be Zent. Probably would have laughed her ass off at the thought, honestly. Damn, this story took a turn in the last 20 books. Okay, it's time for the ceremony, and Hartmut announces Eglantine is the chosen Zent by the Avatar Mestianora, but Eglantine asked her for a blessing similar to what she got at her graduation ceremony, which works to bolster their goals, so Rosemine's down. Too bad Ferdinand isn't, because things never go well when she improvises, but if it'll make everyone else happy, it shouldn't actively hamper their goals, so he doesn't argue. As Anastasius and Eglantine enter, Rosemine fires off a small blessing, and Ferdinand's immediately telling her this is the worst case scenario. Why? All of her charms are now glowing because her divine power is swirling. Yeah, turns out praying when full of divine mana makes it worse. Who could have seen that coming? Look, Ferdinand knows Rosemine by this point, so he expected shenanigans during the ceremony, but beforehand, although it's not like there's anything they can do about it, it's already underway, so they just have to proceed. As Ferdinand looks through his usual stock of crap that might help, Rosemine notes he's packing some serious heat for a religious ceremony. Rejuvenation potions and explosive tools. Dude looks like he's heading back to war, but he brushes her off, saying he never knows what to prepare when she's involved, and to focus on her whole being the divine avatar thing. That's when Hartmut announces her entry and Ferdinand escorts her in. She's literally shining by this point. Well, shining in a way that she can see now, and she takes the stage while Ferdinand joins the musicians below, but it only takes her stepping onto the stage for the Zent selection circle to shine, jumping the gun on their explanation. They planned on it shining after she whirled, where they would explain its purpose and how Detlin didn't activate it, but since Rosemine made it show just by stepping onto the stage, they get that part over with first. Once his TED Talk is over, he tells her to unleash as much power as she can while whirling. Her mana is leaking out pretty bad. The idea is that she'll whirl, open the path, and Ferdinand will slip in using Verbergen's charm to ascend the altar with her. Sounds about right for him. So she gets to whirling, and things seem to be going as planned. The statues are dancing too, and the path is opening. But she barely notices that they're also shining, which isn't normal. When she finishes though, things really go off the rails, because she suddenly vanishes and finds herself in the garden where Iverman tells her she came in second, but he doesn't care and is still making her Zent anyway. Wait, second? Did Gervasio beat her? No. Iverman says that Gervasio has vanished from his sight, so he has no idea where he is now, basically confirming that when one loses their stop, they're cut off from the gods entirely. That means Ferdinand won, right? Yeah, Iverman confirms that Quinta won, but he didn't ask for the path to the foundation and left something in the garden before peacing out. Ferdinand's contempt for the gods is pretty obvious at this point in the story, and some might be wondering why, but there's a few factors in play that we'll be exploring over the rest of this and a little bit into next book. Iverman makes a unilateral decision that she's Zent, and she needs to die the foundation right away. Well, she disagrees, because Ferdinand won, and also they're kind of in the middle of fixing the larger mess that is Jürgen Schmidt's mindset about religious ceremonies, but Iverman's not listening. She's already started dying the foundation but stopped, so why not just accept it? Besides, Iverman just hates Ferdinand, and fair enough, neither have really had good interactions with the other, but while she's trying to convince Iverman to chill out because they've got this, he pushes on ahead stating she needs to beat Ferdinand to dying the foundation. but notes that her mana won't be enough. That's fine, because Mestianora is willing to help out once more, and says she'll take over Rosemine's body again until the foundation is filled. How about no? She doesn't even get a chance to argue though, as light rains down and is repelled back by the charms that Ferdinand made. Interesting. Yverman doesn't get why she's wearing those, but he wants to know why she would take up arms against the gods. She explains she's not, but Mestianora just tried to take control of her body against her will, which isn't cool. Talk about a party foul. She lost some core memories last time that happened, and she's not falling for that shit again. Oh, is that her only concern? No problem then. Yverman then calls on the aid from the rest of the gods to give her mana to fill the foundation. So rather than just yellow light, light of every color rains down in the garden, flashing with the remnants of Mestianora's influence, causing a serious case of mana rebound. It feels like every cell in her body is being split apart. When it's done, Yverman tells her to go fill the foundation, but she's not answering, just screaming in pain. Oh, the gods didn't expect this. They thought the charms were to block all blessings, not just those from Mestianora, so they blasted her with enough divine power to overwhelm the charms, only to be met with no resistance. Yeah, they're actually panicking now, realizing they done fucked up, but Yverman says that Mestianora wishes to descend again to restore order to the divine power in her body. Great, she accepts, but she's in too much pain to actually take the charms off. Yeah, it turns out being a literal tree man rooted in place isn't too great for helping people, so Yverman's useless. Well, good news. Someone's trying to open the path to the garden currently. And though they're lacking the mana, Yverman judges it best to invite them in so they can at least take off her charms. Damn, Yverman's just roasting Eglantine without even meeting her first. Talk about savage. This is actually life or death for her, so Eglantine coming in would be pretty great. But as soon as Yverman opens the door, an explosion pops off in his face. He insults Ferdinand for his tricks once again, but tells him to remove Rosemine's charms so Mestianora can descend once more. But Ferdinand instantly refuses. Oh really? Yeah, Yverman can see how that makes sense. She'll die and then he can take her face stone to complete his book, all without breaking Mestianora's orders about killing. As expected, a Quinta. Okay, now Ferdinand's getting the picture here, so he asks if letting Mestianora descend would save Rosemine. Yverman states that only gods can control divine power. Ferdinand then gets Rosemine's consent and holds her down to take her charms off, and that happens to be when Eglantine enters, and asks if this is really the time or place to be giving in to his desires. But Ferdinand quickly sets her straight that if they don't remove her charms and allow Mestianora to descend once more, Rosemine's gonna die, and they'll both be following right after. So with some effort, they get the chain links off. Interesting that Ferdinand made Eglantine swear her name to Rosemine before taking the throne, and then points out that if the girl prone to being on death's door dies, both she and he will perish as well, almost like he's holding the country hostage. That's when she hears Mestianora's voice in her head saying she'll dismiss her for a bit, but she won't be allowing her into the library this time. That's a punishment worse than death for our bookworm. So she's chilling in a white void for a bit when Mestianora pops back in to tell her she's finished, and unceremoniously tells her to go. Yeah, you kinda get the impression she doesn't really like Rosemine or Ferdinand that much right now, but after Rosemine asks a few questions, we get the whole picture. She didn't mess with her memories this time, but she explains that while the gods were not acting with malice, they definitely wanted to spite Ferdinand for lashing out against Yverman. Mestianora feels pretty bad she got wrapped up in this, though she'd rather Rosemine hurry back before Ferdinand rampages more in her absence. That makes him sound like a wild animal. But to Mestianora, he pretty much is. She says he's much like a weak elite, and throws caution to the wind when it comes to his Geduld. Mestianora says she would rather both Rosemine and Ferdinand stay far away from Yverman from now on. And that's fair. She's planning on taking Ferdinand out of the garden as soon as she's back, which Mestianora urges her to go dye the foundation as that's what the gods lent their power to her for. And despite all of this, Rosemine doesn't seem to hold any grudges against the gods, and parts ways by thanking Mestianora. This actually rounds out Mestianora's character quite a bit. She's not the most complex, but her actions are motivated. Her only concern is making sure Yverman's well because she loves him. She even draws the comparison to Ferdinand and Rosemine between her father and mother, showing why she has some complicated feelings on them as well. Back to reality, Ferdinand is worried that Rosemine is herself and has her memories, but she's pretty confident she does. What did she miss? Well, Mestianora told them about her divine power, how it'll need to be used up, and recover as her mana normally does, but to a lesser extent, and the pain will grow more intense as mortal mana can't really fight back against divine mana. That's leaving out some details, as Eglantine elaborates that to speed up this process, she'll need to be drained of mana entirely, and then dyed with mortal mana to prevent the divine mana from coming back. Which sounds like putting winter before autumn, if you catch my drift. Rosemine's not concerned though. In fact, summoning winter with a Weagleaf sword sounds like a great way to use up her mana, though that would be a waste. Religious sexual symbolism aside, Ferdinand says he'll tell her later what happened and gets the topic back on track. Eglantine has registered the magic tool, which takes the shape of a bracelet to look like the wielders creating it with their stop. That's how the original Gruchicite tool worked as well. Eglantine then gives her thanks for giving them the book, even if it is for just a single generation, which leads to Iverman shooing them off. He's pretty sick of their shit, and again, that's understandable. Dude only wanted to save the country, and got brutally attacked by Ferdinand for it. So she informs him that she promised Mestianora she would in fact dye the foundation. He nods, and then turns back into a tree. Ferdinand tries to stop her, but she says that this divine power was given to her for that purpose, and she can already feel it starting to swell again, so she's about to be in crippling pain. Alright then, so what's the plan? Finish the ceremony and then head straight to the foundation with Eglantine. Cool. But before they leave the garden, Ferdinand snatches up some of the ivory branches strewn about across the ground. Yeah, they're parts of Iverman he cut off using a silver weapon while she was swapped out with Mestianora. Isn't that pretty blasphemous? Damn straight. But what sort of fey paper can they make from pieces of a former god? Okay, she's sold, but definitely gets why Mestianora hates Ferdinand now. So he vanishes to go retake his place, while she and Eglantine return down the stairs for all the gathered nobles to see. It's here Eglantine explains what happened while she was swapped out, that Ferdinand and Mestianora fought verbally, which stunned her that he would take that tone with a god, but he was pissed off what she did to Rosemine in the first place. And Mestianora was pissed off at what he did to Iverman. Yeah, the love comparison here is really strong, but Rosemine fails to connect the dots between herself and Ferdinand. Eglantine again mentions something about the hastening of the arrival of winter, which confuses her more. Oh well, she can probably ask Ferdinand about that later. As for that whole dyeing her thing, he'll dye her when she's almost drained. No big deal. That said, she makes Eglantine promise not to tell anyone what happened in the garden. Not that there's anyone she could really tell in the first place. They get back to the stage and finish the ceremony up, where Hartmut was clearly brought up to speed. She makes the Goddess of Light's crown for Eglantine to swear an oath to said goddess, and just making the divine instrument causes her power to swell more. But is she really going to be able to give a blessing like this? Probably not. But to wrap this whole thing up with a bang, she draws the same magic circle she drew for Ferdinand with a stylo, and then blasts an omni-elemental blessing all over Eglantine's face, which makes her divine power shoot through the roof, to the point that she's actually in pain again. But the show must go on. She prompts Eglantine to make her Gruchicite for the country to see, and she stands up and chants the word, where the book appears in her hand. Everyone cheers, and that's when she, Ferdinand, Anastasius, and Eglantine make for a hasty retreat in the waiting room. What's Hartmut gonna do in the meantime? Share some of the info they were gonna save for the conference with Trauerqual. Yeah, this divine power plot seems to have sprung up in the tail end of the fourth quarter. Are we really gonna wrap this up with only a book and a half left? Let's find out. Gresha and Clarissa get her wrapped in silver cloth to keep her divine power from affecting those around her as soon as they're in the waiting room, and Ferdinand dishes out orders. Only her name sworn are to follow, as they're going somewhere that concerns national secrets. Anastasius tries to follow too, but Ferdinand shoots him down, saying he's not allowed. He tries to protest, but Eglantine all but says the quiet part out loud, that he of all people should know where they're going. Rosemine doesn't look too well here, and if she dies, he knows what's gonna happen to his wife. Yikes. So he takes the hint and asks Ferdinand what he wants him to do in the meantime. Get some knights ready, because they're gonna have to go capture Gervasio as soon as Eglantine's back. They race off, with Rosemine feeling worse and worse with each passing second. And as soon as they're in the library, Ferdinand tells Solange to make sure no one bothers them, as they go up to the second floor where Ferdinand gives Eglantine the key to the foundation. After a quick tutorial, they go inside where Rosemine flops down on the magic circle to pour her divine power into the foundation and rid herself of the god's mana. Ferdinand elaborates that the Sovereign Temple's Bible key opens the country's foundation, just like the ones in the duchies open paths to their foundations, and that should make it pretty damn clear why nobles need to return to serving in the temple. As for how hard the task of dyeing the foundation will be, Ferdinand suspects not that hard. Rosemine's devouring does simplify that whole process, as he says once it's filled, dyeing it shouldn't be a problem. though he doesn't know if the divine mana is going to complicate things at all. Eglantine's not arguing though. He instructs her to redraw the duchy borders first thing when she has the foundation. Otherwise, Sigiswald and Trauerqual can't become obs. She can recycle the divine instruments from the deposed duchies to save herself some effort as well. But as he's running through all the crap that Eglantine's gonna need to do, Rosemine hits a bit of a snag. Now, she needed potions to fill Arnsbach's foundation, and Jürgen Schmidt's is quite a bit larger. So why does she feel like she's got plenty of mana to spare when it's full? Yeah, turns out the gods gave her too much. So what are they gonna do? Well, if she's got mana to spare at the moment, just use it to redraw the duchy borders now. So they do just that, since the borders are pretty much set. Sigiswald lost some of the land he was going to get to Druancul as compensation for his divorce with Adolfina. Guess he's going to be ruling a middle duchy now. Though it's going to rank pretty high at first, having a former royal as an ob. It will likely plummet in the years to come, since he'll be ruling nobles who hate his guts. Plus his now first wife's home duchy is on the other side of the country, so they're not going to be able to provide much support. Sucks to be him, but who cares? I'm more concerned about Adolfina. What's her plan? Well, it turns out she's going to return home and serve as a Geeb. They just got some new land after all, and she wants to take after Rosemine and make a research city for herself. Good on her. She gets to do what she wants. So when they redraw the borders, Ferdinand asks Eglantine to grade Rosemine in the process, as it's pretty much the same as it is for obs. I mean, she did miss last year. Eglantine is the professor of the Archduke candidate classes, so might as well kill two birds with one stone, right? While doing that, they hash out a plan for her to reschedule makeup classes with the professors during the Archduke conference, and she passes her Archduke candidate class right there with flying colors. It's nice to see Adolfina got a happy ending in all this, like, conclusively. She really did get done dirty by Sigiswald. Once it's all said and done, she's still a quarter full on mana. There's not many more mana-intensive tasks to accomplish, so what are they gonna do? Well, Ferdinand says she can focus on filling the tools she'll need as Archduchess when they get back. But for now, they're going to Arnsbach's gathering spot while Eglantine and Anastasius capture Gervasio. Rosemine thinks she could burn some excess mana by riding Lussie, but her mana no longer matches his face tone. And Ferdinand is against that on principle, because her memories are fragmented. She doesn't really see the big deal in that, but it must be important. And I mean, her health is so poor right now, he'd normally be giving her a potion, but that's a bad idea with her mana. Then again, there is that one he tossed Gervasio that uses mana to heal injuries. The only real issue is they would need to hurt her pretty badly to use any useful amount of mana. Yeah, no thanks. What's their plan in the meantime then? Simple. Arnsbach's gathering spot is in such a sorry state because Detlind was opposed to religious ceremonies, so she's gonna fill it, they're gonna harvest crap for her to turn into gold dust for the upcoming city remodel, and repeat until she's drained. Or so he hopes. The knights from Arnsbach are already gathered around, watching from the sky when she descends. Ferdinand tells her to begin, but she's just making the magic circle appear by touching it. The actual prayer should probably come from somebody else, since the last time she prayed, her divine power shot through the roof. Good idea. So Ferdinand recites the prayer for her and the spot recovers pretty much instantly. Good, but while this expended some mana, just participating in the ceremony with the prayer increased her divine power somewhat, though it is an overall net loss. Just not as much as she'd hoped, though this does mean that Spring Prayer is an option still. However, she won't be able to make the instruments in her current state, so they'll need to fill the ones in Arnsbach's temple. Between this and brewing with her mana, they might just manage. Now, performing the citywide remodel would probably use up all of her mana, but it does use the Supreme God's names, and that would likely cause her divine power to surge once more, so not a great idea. Also, the little fact that Ferdinand is currently the ob, so he sends the knights to go gather by motivating them that this will be turned into the gold dust to rebuild their homes. And that's when Hartmut arrives to remind them they'll need to learn this process too, as they'll be responsible for replenishing the gathering spot come the Archduke conference. Other duchies are already doing it too, so there's no excuse. Arnsbach is the future home of the Divine Avatar, so they can't fall behind in ceremonies. You know, it is kind of ironic that the whole association with the gods and divinity is stuck with her, when the gods are accidentally killing her at the moment. They head back to Ehrenfest Storm to rest up for a bit, while Arnsbach gathers and transports ingredients there for her to turn into gold dust. But they need to speak to Sylvester first in a meeting room, which is great as he needs to know what happened to Rosemine anyway. In the meeting, Ferdinand explains that the divine mana needs to be expelled since it's too much for her body to handle and will literally kill her if left unchecked. And when it's expelled, he'll dye her with human mana. Sylvester once again mentions that the gods seem to have ordered him to summon winter early. Rosemine's about fed up hearing that euphemism and not knowing what it means, so she finally asks. Sylvester and Ferdinand don't want to be the ones to tell her, and suggest she asks Riarda, but Florencia steps in as her adoptive mother to explain. The audience has probably picked up on the context clues and knowledge of this world's religion, but it's basically saying having sexual relations before marriage. Yikes. Now Rosemine's super embarrassed, as she told Eglantine that Ferdinand dying her wasn't that big of a deal. Sylvester teases her, but Ferdinand makes it clear that's not what he's doing. He will die Rosemine, but not in that way. She's pissed that he didn't say anything sooner, because in hindsight, it's pretty damn obvious. However, he blames her lack of common sense and failure to grasp euphemisms. Also, her upbringing. Florencia asks what he means by that, which tells us she doesn't know that Rosemine was born a commoner. And Sylvester and Ferdinand shake their heads to say now is probably not the time to reveal that to her. But anyway, he says that due to circumstances, she's been under his mana's influence since before her baptism, and will simply announce that her divine power has faded after he's dyed her. Yeah, no one's even gonna notice. Which makes sense, but this is a race against the clock. The divine power is harder to drain than normal mana, and if they're too slow, her human mana will regenerate, causing it to rebound and kill her eventually. Basically, she's between a rock and a hard place. You know, this kind of raises a question for me. When the gods gave her their divine mana, did they give her more mana than she actually could hold? Or is it that since this mana came from the gods, it like innately carries their divine protections and blessings, so it's extremely efficient? I don't have an answer on that. That's just different interpretations and some food for thought. So Ferdinand says that they'll give some of the gold dust that Rosemine's going to be making to Ehrenfest as compensation for Gerlach's estate she destroyed. But on that note, have the Plantain and Gilberta companies send over the blueprints for their workshops in Groschel, as they'll need to move as soon as the Archduke conference is over. That way their stores can be made when the city is rebuilt. That's fine, but wouldn't she like to meet them personally to inform them? Here's confirmation that she remembers Mark and Benno, but not Lutz. She asks Ferdinand if her hairpin craftswoman would attend such a meeting, and he says probably, so she should avoid meeting them for now. That pretty much settles things. She'll stay there tonight making gold dust, and they'll leave for Arnsbach tomorrow morning. If they don't succeed here, there won't be a second chance if her mana recovers, which means that she and all of her namesworn will die, basically leading to Jürgen Schmidt's collapse. So Ferdinand carries her out of the room and hands her off to Angelica. Because she can't use rejuvenation potions to recover her stamina, she has to rest as much as possible. No unnecessary exercise. Her retainers raise a slight fuss about Ferdinand carrying her, more so Cornelius, though he doesn't actually voice them for once. And really, it's more about her health than a scandal. Yeah, there's more important things to worry about than saving face in front of Eglantine. Not even her retainers seem to care how close she is to Ferdinand now. Anyway, he dishes out orders to prepare for a trip across Arnsbach tomorrow for spring prayer. But before he leaves for the night, he hands her a massive face stone to make into a new high beast. While he didn't want her modifying hers while her memories were fragmented, she can always just make a new high beast. Sounds good. Besides, it's going to be necessary since they can't stay at the Gibbs estate, due to just how little they trust them in Arnsbach, and a lot of her retainers aren't used to traveling. But before the Arnsbach Knights arrive, Charlotte brings a load of materials that Karstedt and the Knights gathered from Ehrenfest's spot to help burn through her mana. Charlotte seems really worried here, and Rosemine can't exactly place why, but she basically urges her to leave the academy because it's so close to the gods. Yeah, Charlotte's just concerned knowing that Rosemine can die, but she's not exactly entertaining the thought now, so that's why she's not really seeing Charlotte's issue. But sure, they part ways with Charlotte telling her to rid herself of her divine mana so she can see her library city one day. So you might notice at this point, Rosemine's memory issues are actually leading to some stilted reactions. Like she's not picking up on subtleties at all, but why specifically here with Charlotte? Because she's lacking the foundation for why she developed such a close relationship with Charlotte in the first place. Rosemine's missing those formative memories with her lower city family, putting distance between her and those she cares about, but still remembers in her noble life. After a night of making gold dust and a rainbow lassie, she wakes up not feeling refreshed at all. Yeah, her mana recovered while she slept, basically wiped out all the progress she made the previous night. That's frustrating. So they leave the dorm, and outside are a bunch of people from the lower ranking duchies asking her to not just bless Arnsbach. Ferdinand elaborates that they're treating her with more authority than the new Zent, begging her to give them more favor than Arnsbach, but they're gonna disregard her as soon as her divine mana fades, so screw them. They push through to the Adalgisa villa, where they teleport to their new home. Ferdinand immediately heads back for some final checks, leaving Rosemine to chill with Hartmut and some of the knights who are going to be attending with them. Her new rainbow Lessie gets called Divine because it's literally glowing rainbow colors, which is neat, but also what the hell are the standards of beauty here? I guess rainbow-colored high beasts aren't common, because we've never seen one before. Fine, who cares? At the castle, Hartmut has her test the divine instruments, where the chalice fills with rainbow liquid mana, rather than green or red. That seems weird, until you realize the prayer is what actually turns the mana green in the first place. So they decide to test this theory, and dump some of this rainbow mana onto the ground and see the greenery still grows. Well, that's what really matters, I guess. And since she didn't say the prayer, her divine mana is holding steady. Even better. But while the Arensbach nobles are praising her divine avatar status, that makes her briefly not want to let go of this power, but Clarissa and Hartmut snap them out with an impassioned speech. She's not gonna save Arensbach? Their duchy was doomed the moment Detlin betrayed the royal family? No, she's gonna burn it down so a new duchy can rise from the ashes. The nobles can either be punished, or worship Rosemine as her new vassals in her duchy. Well, tough choice. But while them whipping up religious zealots in her name is concerning, Hartmut informs her that they received a letter from Eglantine, asking her to think up a new name and color for her duchy, with the caveat that they can't have two Ehrenfests, as her family name is still currently that. True enough, that gets her excited, so what should she pick? Well, two names come to mind, Venezia or Alexandria. Ferdinand shows up just in time to put an end to her silliness. She'll need to be mindful about future generations and pick one that's not too hard to pronounce. And besides, this can wait until later. Of course Rosemine would pick the name for her duchy based on a major port city famed for books, and the other being arguably the most famous library and gardens in the ancient world. Very on brand. So they're hitting up Indewald first to fill the northern provinces with mana. They have been the most neglected after all. So she forms Lessie and tries to go with a camper style to house everyone, but Ferdinand rejects it. Instead, they opt for basically a floating house, with rooms for men and women as is customary in this world. Crazy this seems to have worked, but I guess as long as she can imagine it flying, it does. With that out of the way, she's ready to dump mana into the land right there. But again, Ferdinand shoots that down. No, they actually need to avoid settlements for the moment, because the land is so deprived here that if they supply farming towns right away, it'll lead to hungry fae beasts swarming them. Oh no. So they actually need to fill the outskirts first to avoid commoner deaths. So how are they going to do this without prayer? Simple. She's just going to airdrop mana all over the land by holding the chalice up while continually filling it. That'll work, but be tedious as hell. And after just a few hours of doing it, her arms are tired. They eventually break for lunch, where Ferdinand asks how she's holding up. And it's not great. She's tired as hell after just that morning, and suggests tying the chalice to her stomach so she can fill it without relying on her arms. That's not ladylike, but between that and dying, unladylike wins out. What's the mana situation like though, as that's much more important? She estimates that this process should take her about 5 days at the rate they're going. That's unacceptable. She's exhausted after just a single morning. Her body will give out before her mana does at this rate. After that afternoon, she finishes supplying Vindewald and another province where they dumped mana into the sea, which cleared up its murky water, leading to the fish immediately rebounding. That got her hyped, which wasn't a smart move. Dinner finishes in a flash where she turns to talking about her library duchy's name, and Ferdinand's annoyed since she was just complaining about being tired. Suddenly she's got energy for this? Whatever. He slips her a sound blocker and says the names she came up with were actually pretty normal sounding. So, where'd she get them? Was it her dream world? Yeah, one is the Italian name for Venice, Italy, and the other is obviously the ancient city of Alexandria. Well, he quickly eliminates the first one, as that's apparently pretty similar sounding to a Lanzanavian word, cementing the sugar country is basically just Italy. Also, you know, not a good look considering recent events. So Ferdinand accepts her name of Alexandria, though his takeaway is that she's much more attached to her former life than before Mestianora took over her body. And that's true. From her commoner days, she can't really remember much. She doesn't think it's impacting her daily life that much though, but Ferdinand disagrees that she's saying things he wouldn't expect from her, likely because her core memories have been removed, making her revert more to Urano's personality. As for her new duchy's color, she briefly considers black because they're close to the country gate for darkness, but Ferdinand says they'd need to convince the sovereignty to change theirs. possibly to white, as that's what Zents used to wear in the past, but Rosemine corrects him, saying it was Zent candidates who obtained their book of Mestianora who used to wear it, and that would include them as well, as it was meant to dodge a Weagaleeb's ire. Yeah, Ferdinand's not publicly a Zent candidate, so he wouldn't wear it. Plus, it's too much work. So rather than black, how about a dark blue like her hair? He grabs it and says some pretty romantic words, which wash right over her. Smooth, Rosemine. But the color's fine, so why not? As for the crest, she's thinking she would like to incorporate LAKEY, but Ferdinand shoots that down immediately. No, rather than an ugly-ass grun, they should use the library's magic tools. Now, shoemills might be considered weak, but those tools definitely aren't. Adding a face stone to their forehead would clarify that too. She's not sold, so they ask their retainers, and they all immediately say the shoemills would be much better. Also include a book, but not the Grutricite. That would be confusing, since the country's crest contains it too, so they'll take inspiration from the Rosemine Workshop crest instead. And Ferdinand agrees. Looks like she's been outvoted. She was never gonna win with LAKEY. Just embrace the shoemills at this point, Rosemine. Another day and another crushing realization that her mana's right back to where she started, even after dumping so much all over the duchy. The worst part is she's feeling sicker too. She goes to eat breakfast with Ferdinand where she doesn't really have much of an appetite. What's the plan now that the previous one has failed after just a single day? Well, nothing says she has to be the one racing around. She can just fill the divine instruments and have her retainers use them in her place. That's working smarter, not harder. Even Ferdinand has to admit that's a good idea, but also not a great sign. Rosemine always comes up with great plans when she's backed into a corner, so this isn't good at all. He gives her a small drip of a potion and she remarks how nasty it tastes, which is even more worrying to Ferdinand. So what exactly did he give her? He won't say just yet, but the fact that it tasted bad means they're running out of time. So they enact the plan where Rosemine rests while her retainers get to work, though after a few hours, she's recovered her stamina somewhat, but also her mana. So she's still feeling pretty bad. Gresha and Lisaletta bring her the divine instruments, which needed refilled anyway, and that makes her feel somewhat better at least. She eats a quick lunch where she again barely touches her plate, and receives a report that a nearby province is facing a Fey Beast horde. That sounds promising, because that means Leonor can activate Shutsaria's shield, they can slay Fey Beasts with Leidenschaft's spear, and then heal the land with Flutrane's staff. Awesome. This province also borders Ilgner, who is still recovering from the war, so pulling a Fey Beast horde away from them would just be the neighborly thing to do. On the bright side, they're bound to have similar plants to Ilgner, meaning they can probably get some familiar ingredients for paper in the future. That night, after a lot of hunting, she's actually feeling much better. She rested, dumped her mana, and is even feeling hungry again. Great. But Ferdinand gives her a quick medical exam where she thinks he's being overly cautious. However, he just gives her a simple warning not to overeat now that her appetite has returned. And that doesn't even seem to be a problem, because she still barely eats despite feeling hungry. That's weird. Ferdinand then shoos her to bed to get some more rest, but she's not really feeling it, because that just means her mana's gonna recover again, and thus, she falls asleep with a growling stomach. What a weird thing to point out over the past few chapters. It's almost like it means something, and Ferdinand of all people was familiar with it enough to warn her not to overeat. Rosemine wakes up from a terrible nightmare where she was begging someone not to go, but she can't recall their face. So, good to know her memories are still knocking about in that book-filled brain of hers. Bad news, she's still feeling like crap and is hungry. Lisaletta and Leonor offer her the divine instruments that her knights emptied after dinner, so she could expel some of her mana in case she needed to, which she accepts. Gresha enters a beat later, dressed in some simple clothes because she was clearly asleep. Unfortunately for her, she's name-sworn, and the only attendant who can physically touch Rosemine. That's been a major burden for her, but they get her washed up despite the early hour. That's when she notices something again. She feels a sensation similar to when Gervasio returned from the garden during the war. Does that mean he survived and is somehow in her panda bus right now? Suddenly she's freaking out, but Leonor and Lisaletta give a knowing smirk. They clarify that she's definitely detecting Ferdinand, who's still working downstairs. So, would she like to go check? And she agrees. Eckhart pokes his head out when they approach, and lets them on in. How did he know it was her coming? Well, because she radiates divine mana, obviously. Their little living room there has been converted into a makeshift office, and Ferdinand lets her sit down. What's he working on? Preparing for the upcoming Archduke conference, obviously. Clearly she couldn't sleep and tells him she had a bad dream, and now she's wondering what exactly happened to Gervasio. We get confirmation that they captured him, though Gervasio still took out half of their knights when they went to retrieve him, and from there, Eglantine searched his memories, and his punishment will likely be announced at the Archduke conference. But don't worry about all that, because she should be focusing on Alexandria. He spreads out what he's been working on, and it's schematics for her library city. Though he has tweaked some of her ideas as they were too library focused, personal teleporters to the library were simply out of the question, and since she'll be visiting it, commoners can't go there yet, so Ferdinand's compromised to let those with the highest status be closest to the library. Though she wants commoners to have access to, literacy rates are still abysmal among them, so that can wait until a later date. That'll just create pushback from the nobles. Instead, they should focus on the temple, as Alexandria is going to be the duchy of the divine avatar, which means they can create it with her classrooms in mind. Wow, that's been on the back burner since part 2. As for the citywide remodel, it'll put too much of a burden on the commoners to do it once, so she suggests doing it piecemeal, which is a pretty good idea. It'll allow Eustace and Hartmut a chance to train their scholars to work with commoners, rather than just order them around. But as they're digging into this discussion and talks about her Gutenbergs and memories come up, Ferdinand ends it abruptly so she doesn't get too excited and get sick. Great thinking. He asks if she's ready to go back to bed yet, but she doesn't want to due to her mana recovering. She explains that she's feeling hungry, but still doesn't seem to have an appetite. What can she do about that? Well, he has an idea. He gives her another drop of that potion from yesterday that she thought was bitter as hell, but now it doesn't seem to have much flavor at all. What's that mean? Well, her hunger is likely connected to her mana. Ferdinand explains that when he was in the mana replenishment hall being forcibly drained, he felt a sensation similar to hunger as well. So Ferdinand suggests they drain her mana all at once, rather than drag this out to avoid her suffering. Was that not the first thing you thought to try? Okay, so her mana being low was why she was feeling hungry despite not actually being hungry. Which means they're close. Wait, it's gonna get worse? She's not down with that. Thus, he proposes using a duplication spell to create multiple healing magic circles across the duchy. That could work, but it's much too time-consuming. Apparently, Ferdinand thought they could recreate the magic circle above the academy with her copy and place spell, which is absurd considering it was drawn by Iverman originally. The first Zent created Jürgen Schmidt with Iverman's help, using his face stone as the core. It's just not possible in modern day to do that. Or is it? Ferdinand won't let her get the gods to help, but she doesn't think they need it. They do have pieces of Iverman that Ferdinand got a few days ago, and it's not like they need to recreate the Holy Land entirely, just a massive mana injection to replenish the land, so they can simplify the circle quite a bit. As for the divine power to do this, she's packing it herself. Now Ferdinand sees what she's getting at, and if they place Iverman's fragments at the border gates and center it at the foundation, it should cover the whole duchy without issue. So they've got themselves a plan, where Ferdinand has her go rest for a bit before they head back. They'll have to finish this today, so that night'll be the earliest as long as she can hold out. So back at the castle, Ferdinand is putting her to work on the bits she can actually do, while he does the more intense brewing. She's placing magic circles on the branches, which is pretty damn hard since they're so small, but they need to combine those with omni-elemental face stones filled with divine power. Oh hey, luckily they have a huge one for Rainbow Lessie they're making as the main one for the foundation. The plan is to insert Iverman's branches into these face stones, carry the smaller ones to the border gates, while they cast the massive spell from the foundation hall itself. With her work done, Ferdinand has her go rest on his bench while he finishes his brewing. She wants him to get some sleep too, but that's not happening. He's just as exhausted as her, but her life is on the line, so he's not going to rest just yet. So she finally asks why Ferdinand is going so far out of the way for her, and he said he chose to be by her side because they're like family. Rosemine's core memories being absent here makes this scene sting a bit, because she says that's pretty strange. She can imagine all the people around her going to such lengths for those they serve or love, but she can't imagine anyone doing it for her specifically. Noble society would prevent Karstedt, Elvira, Cornelius, pretty much all of her family from taking such steps. So why is Ferdinand going above and beyond here? And connected to that, he put her under his protection forever ago, which makes that true family gap even larger. He has something he wants to say, but it's probably better to wait until the spell is over, so he kicks her out to go rest in her room until it's time. She's been saying that he's like family to her for the past 2 parts, and when he finally returns that sentiment, she stumbles and doesn't know what he's talking about. Why? Because her notion of family was shaped by hers in the lower city. Ferdinand finally understands what that means and wants it for himself, and her not having that basis means that she gets that it is important, but not exactly why. Yeah, her missing memories are really causing some issues with her relationships at this point. She takes a quick nap where her divine power recovered enough for her to hurt again, which sucks. But they pretty much go right to the Foundation where Eustace and Gresha are the only ones permitted to stay, as their name's sworn, so they're not going to tell anyone what they see. The fact both of them are in the Foundation through the Ob's chambers is a bit confusing to her, as only the Ob should be allowed to enter. But Ferdinand is currently Ob Arnsbach, and she can't take over for him until she's died with human mana once more. Now she's a bit worried that Ferdinand is going to steal her library city and make a research one, but she's already agreed to give him everything he wants, so he doesn't see the need to be Archduke. Sounds like he's kinda given up on his desires here, but on the contrary, they're guiding him more than ever. And to achieve them, he first needs to rid her of her divine mana. So they get to work where he made a small water mirror that will follow the spell as it travels through the duchy. And thus they begin. A pillar of rainbow light shoots up through the ceiling where they can see what's going on outside. It then turns green and grows over the city, stretching over the dark ocean where we can see Strahl and some other knights looking on and off from the sealed Bonzenov country gate. Then it moves over to Eckhart holding back Dunkelfelger's crazed knights, cheering his onlookers from the one they share with Dunkelfelger, and as the light moves, her hunger and exhaustion grow worse and worse, to the point that she practically falls over onto Ferdinand. They see the Workstock gate next where Lorenz is protecting the branch. It's already been closed, but once Trauerqual is established, they'll likely reopen it together. The last of her heat and discomfort vanish as more mana is sucked out, but they're still not done. They arrive at Frembeltag's gate, with Matthias overlooking the circle with a proud expression. She's happy to see it as he's looked so serious after the attack, but Ferdinand tells her to be a lady that he can be proud of in the future. That's probably not going to happen though. One last stop as more mana is sucked out, and she goes from feeling hot to cold, as she can barely keep her eyes open at this point. Now she's looking at Ehrenfest Gate with Cornelius being thrown up in the air by Bonifacius, as he celebrates his granddaughter's achievement. They're finally in the home stretch. He tells her to just keep her hands on it to keep it activated as he says the prayer to finish the spell. As her consciousness fades, she doesn't feel her divine power reacting to the prayer, and thus leaves everything in Ferdinand's hands. Wow, that's the end of Rosemine's perspective for this volume, and a hell of a cliffhanger to leave off on. Did she succeed in ridding herself of her divine power, or did she die? We don't know. The epilogue picks up from Gresha's perspective, where Eustace is instructing her and Lisa Letta how to check for various poisons in Arnsbach's food, prior to the spell being cast. She does find his skills impressive as an attendant and scholar. After the meal though, we see that Ferdinand kicked out all the non-name sworn, and had Rosemine order Gresha to not reveal anything she sees inside. He then gave the same order to Eustace, as they dipped inside the Foundation Hall, leaving the two of them to wait. Her job is to inform the other retainers when they can enter the chambers once more when her lady returns. We get some rare insight into Gresha's thoughts here now that she's served Rosemine for a bit. And sure enough, she's about as brainwashed as Hartmut is, though just not as outspoken about it. She resents the gods for doing this to her lady, but not because her life is on the line. Yeah, she has zero issues following Rosemine into death, but more because she respects Rosemine so much, and there's not a damn thing she can do to help her as a mere med-noble attendant. And Eustace gets a laugh out of that. Lisa Letta and Hartmut have learned enough between them to act as her doctor, but they still both fall pretty short of Ferdinand. There's a reason Rosemine trusts him so much more. Eustace comments how a husband might have been able to replace him after he left a year and a half ago, but that's definitely not happening now that they're engaged. Though Eustace notes, Gresha doesn't seem too happy. Does she dislike Ferdinand? Quite the opposite, and even if she did, it's not like she would tell Eustace that. She's upset because she'll never be able to repay her debt for Rosemine saving her. But Eustace disagrees. He tells her that she's her own savior, as she had the resolve to escape her circumstances. Wait, he knows? Yeah, Ferdinand did a thorough check on anyone in the playroom who would be attending the academy with Rosemine, with a pretty close eye on those who were likely to give their names. Eustace explains they know pretty much everything about her from her first employer down to when she developed mana sensing. That's kinda creepy, but we already know Gresha's origins at this point, but what we don't know is just how awful her treatment was. When she told Rosemine her story before her name swearing, she said she was teased and was likely to be used in a political marriage. That was actually a lie. She was being treated far worse than that, because her father never planned on letting her have a normal marriage to escape his house, or being treated as a regular noble. She was being sold as a mistress to the highest bidder since she was a child of the temple. And who bought her? The former Geeb Wiltord. though he's already been executed, he and his eldest son had violated Gresha already, and thus after the purge, she was going to be sent back to her life of never-ending misery at home. That's why she wanted to give her name to Rosemine so badly for protection. Did Lorenz know? That's a question that's been plaguing my mind since reading this damn passage. If you'll recall, Rosemine told him to quit teasing her all the way back in Volume 4 with his flirty lines. Now, he did drop the act right away, good on him, so it's hard to say if he knew and was just being a dick, or if he was oblivious and just realized that his usual attitude wouldn't fly around Rosemine. Either way, that's a hell of a bombshell to drop at the tail end of a book. Eustace explains that only Ferdinand, his namesborn, and her know about her past now. Hermu and Cornelius couldn't dig as deep as them due to their faction limitations, but Gresha's frustrations come down to does Rosemine even need anyone else with Ferdinand there? And strange enough, Eustace feels the same way about Rosemine. She's rescued him far more than Eustace has been able to. And while he's happy that Ferdinand is finally healthy and at peace, he's still frustrated he couldn't deliver that to the man he gave his life to serving. But we don't have time for that. As the spell starts, Hermut sends a message stating how the spell looks, and that makes Eustace rush to the window to try and see it. Yeah, dude went from someone respectable to a goofball in a split second. Reports come in from each of the gates as the spells arrive, and Gresha receives them all patiently. Lorenz's comes in, where the Arnsbach Knights feel bad for old Workstock, since it's being left out of this healing ritual. But she doesn't care, they deserve it, and would likely only resent Rosemine anyway. No point in helping them. Yeah, the Arnsbach nobles actually wanted to absorb that territory before the meeting with the royals, but everyone from Ehrenfest opposed it due to the security risks involved. Matthias's report comes next, where he says he suddenly feels the urge to pray like Hartmut does to Lady Rosemine. Gresha's reaction is priceless, where she basically mentally asks, why hold back? After her mana was dyed by a goddess, all of her namesworn changed somewhat, becoming like Hartmut a bit, and Gresha realizes that's probably why she doesn't fear dying. When the spell finally comes to an end, she waits patiently for Rosemine and Ferdinand to emerge, but they don't. She remembers Ferdinand warning that if the worst comes to pass, all of her namesworn will die. Her, Ferdinand, and the new Zent will all perish, with Jürgenschmidt following pretty close behind. While that's extreme, Gresha again finds it a pretty acceptable bargain, because she doesn't want to live in a world without her lady, telling us once again, Gresha gave her name for exactly the right reasons. Besides, if the gods want the country to survive like they've been saying, they need only let Rosemine do so. So while she and Eustace are on edge, and Lieseletta asks through Ordnance if Rosemine has returned yet, they have no option but to wait patiently. After all, them being alive means she is too, and Eustace adds that they have no need to worry because Ferdinand is there with her. To take her mind off things for a second though, he asks that she heat up some water so they can have tea when they return. But while she silently wishes for her to hurry back, Gresha remembers what Rosemine said ages ago. The gods only answer when you pray for others. She'd always prayed to the gods to save her in the past, so this time, she prays that Rosemine comes back safely. So we have confirmation that Rosemine survived, for now at least, but what's in store? Will she get her memories back? Did she actually manage to get rid of her divine power? And what the hell's even left to cover next book? Those are all questions for later, because we have the final round of side stories to get through. Yeah, spoiler, next volume doesn't have any. First up is the transference ceremony from Hannelor's perspective. She and her family are making their way to the hall for the ceremony, which is a pretty big deal. Coronations are usually only held during the Archduke Conference, so one being held outside it, and invitations being extended to those who have yet to graduate, as well as baptized children, is honestly unprecedented. Lestalot remarks on that too, saying they had to hold a lengthy debate on who was safe to bring, and decided on their younger half-sister from their father's second wife, Lungtaza, over the girl's older brother, Raufarek, since she was least likely to cause disrespect. Lestalot asserted his power as the next Dob to ensure that he would be attending over his uncle and grandfather, while Hannelore was just invited by Rosemine, so her spot was non-negotiable. Not that he's fooling his parents, he was only so thrilled to come when he learned that Rosemine and Eglantine would both be whirling, and they even had to check his stuff to make sure he didn't sneak in any of his art supplies. Funny, now that they have a chance to look over the hall, they see most duchies didn't bring kids too young to attend the academy, though Ehrenfest is an obvious exception, and Melchior is wearing his high bishop robes with pride too, making Lestalot grimace. Though Hannelore says she spoke with him when she went to Ehrenfest, and it's very clear now that Rosemine was not abused in the temple, as Melchior is taking over the role with enthusiasm. which Lestalot immediately sees the angle that they're only using this to bolster the idea that religious ceremonies need to become more widespread. He assumes that Melchior must be the next Ob after all, since Wilfried is smiling like a dope after he lost Rosemine as his fiancée. He's pretty critical of him since he was so adamant that he would be the next Ob Ehrenfest, and even won Rosemine in their game at Ditter. Annalora steps up to correct that though, really showing us just how much of a spine she's grown since her 3rd year. That Wilfried's been aware of his engagement being cancelled for at least a year. Lestalot doesn't let up though, because he literally warned Wilfried the royals would try to pull the shit they did. So, he's clearly an idiot. Annalora doesn't disagree on that, but she's quick to point out that Rosemine wouldn't have made for a good first wife for Dunkelfelger. No, Ferdinand is a much better suited partner to keep her under control. Annalora was pretty shocked to hear that all of her efforts to get Ferdinand and Rosemine married were pretty much in vain, as he was already ordered to marry the next Ob Arensbach by Trauerqual. But that also means she'll need to take an adopted daughter to replace her as Ob when she comes of age. Yeah, she can't pick and choose which parts of the royal decree they want to follow, but surely Ferdinand has a plan in place, as this daughter situation could actually tear their new duchy apart. Other duchies are likely to interfere too, trying to marry her as well to stop the birth of a greater duchy subservient to Ehrenfest. However, Sieglinde points out the reach of Ferdinand's name-swearing plan though. Eglantine has already given her name to secure the book, so receiving a royal decree from her will be pretty damn easy in the future. At no point will Rosemine need to worry about interference in her new duchy. Yeah, it's no wonder they started calling him the Lord of Evil in the first place. Once the ceremony starts, we see the nobles in the stands are none the wiser to all the changes in the plan. Though Hannelore remarks how she never thought she'd lose to Rosemine in height, but even that's gone now, making her the shortest in her year. That sucks. But when Rosemine disappears after her whirl, everyone's shocked. Ob Dunkelfelger says this is just like in the battle, but this time, Ferdinand wasn't taken with her. That's when Ferdinand takes the stage and announces that Rosemine was invited by the gods, and urges Eglantine to whirl next. That's almost cruel, since Rosemine's whirl was so captivating due to her face stones and divinity, but this is a ploy to put her above Eglantine in status. Lestalot bemoans not having his utensils, and also the whirling order, and everyone even says how sad it is that she's going second. And yeah, it is. But from a technical standpoint, Eglantine is a better whirler, so it's still a sight to behold. It takes some time for the circle to light up and the statues to move, but when the whirl ends, the path to the garden opens for Eglantine. That's a relief for everyone, as they were worried she wouldn't receive an invitation at all. Though not as flashy, she does go up the altar. Once Eglantine is gone, the hall is abuzz with chatter. Everyone now sees the purpose of the rituals, and this basically cements their revival. But around this point, things start to feel like they're taking too long, and Dunkelfelger notices just how anxious the Arensbach section is getting. Eventually, Hartmut announces their return, and everyone can feel Rosemine's divine power grew more while she was gone. As Lestalot continues to bitch about lacking his utensils to draw, his mother chastises him, and he'll just have to commit it to memory. After they make the Grucheshite and bail, the ceremony ends with every archduke now realizing they need to fix their temple situation. In the aftermath though, Ob Dunkelfelger and Sieglinde noticed something was up, because they clearly had to make some of the announcements they were planning to save for the Archduke conference early, but they have no clue what could have gone down. Next is vows in the Garden of Beginnings from Eglantine's perspective. Right after their meeting with Rosemine, Anastasius is begging her to reconsider giving her name. Why? Well, he knows his wife doesn't really want to be Zent. She said as much before they got married, and when they made Rosemine circle the shrines. What's her reasoning here? Well, nothing's really changed much, just that their options to avoid war are pretty limited. Back when they first got married, they promised to cede the throne to Sigiswald. If Anastasius and Eglantine became Zent, tensions would rise between Klausenberg and Joanschel. As for Rosemine in this, she was ahead of Eglantine at the time, and her adoption and subsequent marriage would have tied the issue up pretty neatly. Now, however, there just are none. That logic right there is why Rosemine considered Ferdinand the royal's hostage in the first place. This is just turnabout though, so Eglantine doesn't begrudge her. In fact, it's expected to exploit an obvious weakness in noble society. Hell, Rosemine's pretty admirable for having escaped all the circumstances thrust upon her by higher-ranking duchies and the royal family. Eglantine couldn't even do that of her own power. Her only real regret in this is that no one in the royal family had the resolve or ability to take the job up instead. But in terms of a deal, this isn't exactly that bad for their family, which is why she's okay accepting it. Her becoming Zent would be the most peaceful path to the future now, despite being opposed to it earlier, and Anastasius promises to stay by her side and support her through this trouble, even if it means venturing into the temple. At the ceremony itself, Eglantine was floored by the whole situation, but didn't let her facade slip even once. Good for her, even as she panicked internally about making the circle activate and everything. Yeah, she was actually concerned if she would be able to. Once in the garden, she saw Ferdinand apparently forcing himself on Rosemine, but the situation became clear and she leapt into action. With the charms off, Mestianora descended, and Ferdinand tells her to kneel as the goddess smites insolent people. Is he speaking from experience here? Yeah, but he goes on to say that the job of the Zent was originally to mediate between the gods and mortal world, meaning it's a much bigger job than just handling disputes between duchies like she thought. The current royal family really is a mockery of the system. Also, don't make any promises, as the gods basically turn them into contracts. So Mestianora asks what Ferdinand did to Yverman, and he proceeds to be rude as hell, demanding to know exactly what the gods did, and just how convenient it is. Her descent just so happens to be the one thing that can fix it. Yeah, he's not buying this shit. A lot is thrown at Eglantine in this scene. That Yverman's name comes up, she knows that he's Jürgen Schmidt's core from the old stories, and then holy shit, he's this tree person who's standing literally right there. But also, who the hell are Mine, Quinta, and Terza? She picks up on the context clues that it's Rosemine, Ferdinand, and Gervasio. So, is a new name part of getting the Book of Mestianora? She doesn't know. But Ferdinand's insolent tone makes Mestianora threaten to end his ass right there, which is when he drops his trump card on the table. If she attacks him in Rosemine's body, that would technically violate the contract between gods and mortals. That never ends well for whichever side violates said contract, be they god or mortal. Okay, so what if she just lets Rosemine die instead to hurt him? Yeah, he wouldn't recommend that, as her life is now far too important. Everyone capable of reaching the foundation is name sworn to her. Yeah, that was his true goal with the whole name swearing thing, to ensure that not even the gods could hurt Rosemine anymore. Besides, while the gods did prefer Gervasio as a candidate, he posed much too big of a threat to Jürgen Schmidt, as Yverman is currently immobilized because of the technology invented in Lanzanov. Plus, joke's on her, she didn't forbid attacks on Yverman. So Ferdinand hits the point home that Gervasio and his silver shit are dangerous, by throwing a knife at Yverman and cutting off some of his hair. Yeah, normal weapons shouldn't be able to do that. Okay, Mestianora is seriously pissed off, but realizes she has no leverage and demands he fixes Yverman. However, he won't do that until she tells him how to fix Rosemine's memory and mana. But that's when Mestianora points to Eglantine, and says have her give the antidote while she explains. Wow, she knows Eglantine's name? That's unexpected. So she heads over while Mestianora explains Rosemine needs to be drained and then dyed with human mana, to which Eglantine assumes the gods are demanding they put winter before autumn. How salacious. Well, I guess they could just keep it a secret between them, since, you know, it is necessary to save her life. When she gives Yverman the antidote, she realizes he resembles her grandfather, the previous Zent, quite a bit. You might also remember, Anastasius remarked how Gervasio looked like old Jürgen Schmidt royalty, and Ferdinand's appearance has been compared to Yverman and Gervasio as well. This sort of hints that Yverman might be the father of Jürgen Schmidt in more ways than one. Not really confirmed in this book, but food for thought. He isn't surprised that Ferdinand brought those dangerous weapons, though Eglantine explains they were from Gervasio, and he would have actually ruined Jürgen Schmidt had he succeeded. Well, that's the mortal perspective at least. And he asks why Eglantine is there. Well, she tells him that she's going to be crowned Zent after getting the book from Rosemine. But Yverman hits her with a dose of reality that she's unqualified as she doesn't have the Book of Mestianora. She lacks both the mana and prayers required for the role. But Ferdinand explains after his talk with Mestianora that Eglantine is to be an intermediary Zent. The goal is to return the process to the old ways. The Grutricite they're giving her is a magic tool, but one that'll fade after a single generation, so they're not repeating Albacenti's mistake. Eglantine asks why he didn't just go for the throne if he could make a magic tool Grutricite like that, but he replies that he didn't for the same reason as her, and she immediately understands. He didn't want to start another war. Mestianora asks her if what Ferdinand says is true, and she confirms that war has already shaken Jürgen Schmidt to its core. His path forward is much more stable than Rosemine's, as she's far too self-centered and doesn't put the needs of the many above those closest to her. If she became Zent, the country would simply be swallowed in her book lust. So Yverman asks if she plans to mediate between men and the gods, and against Ferdinand's advice, she says she does. Why is she going that far? She's taking control of the fate thrust upon her. She won't rule because there's no choice or rely on a magic tool. No, she wants to be a true Zent now. However, Vermin doesn't trust a human's words, and thus makes her vow to the gods themselves as a beam of light shines on Eglantine. She makes a promise to all the gods that she will circle the shrines and obtain her own Book of Mestianora, to which Mestianora says she bore witness to this vow, and gently smiles on Eglantine. And lastly, is the new Ob's awesome magic, from Jiffy's perspective. Who the hell is Jiffy? He's some random Arenspot commoner, chilling and eating some grilled and salted fish with his pals. And they've seen all the crazy shit going down lately. This is a great side story to read, and I won't rob you of that. So instead, I'll just touch on the highlights. Lonzanov was being a bunch of entitled pricks in the lead up to this invasion, so when some new Wob showed up and kicked their sorry asses to the curb and closed the country gates so they wouldn't come back, the commoners considered her a hero. They're starved for information on their new Wob, and they've just got some juicy stuff coming in. She likes her fish cooked the same way the commoners do, fire grilled and covered in salt. That's insane, because the commoners know nobles usually eat their food covered in all those fancy Lonzanov spices. But their new Wob likes food like they eat? Sounds like their kind of girl. Speaking of, they blame Lonzanov for the cloudy water and lack of fish lately. It traces all the way back to the old Ob's death, that the ocean suddenly turned to crap, and that just so happened to be when the Lonzanovian ships started flooding their ports. When the attack happened, they thought they were going to get blamed, so they fought back against Lonzanov and tried to save the nobles. But when the Ob showed up, they got a blast of healing showing she approved. Except that healing worked apparently too well, as one of the fishermen's dads actually was able to come out of retirement after his leg was fixed up. Yeah, they're now fighting over who owns the family boat. Fun stuff. That's when a guy from a merchant vessel comes up and tells them about all the crazy stuff he saw up north. Their new Wob is flying around on a massive rainbow thing and fixed the land up there. They all can't believe what he's saying, but he confirms that things are far worse up north than down by the capital. But while they're gossiping, they hear word that night, a massive spell is going to heal the land of their duchy. They assume it's going to be the rainbow thing the dude was talking about, but who knows? They're excited to head out later and catch a glimpse though, but rather than a rainbow high beast, they see some green light shoot around the noble quarter to the country gate, and then back again, creating a massive magic circle. Though, they don't know what that is, they just say it looks like lacework. But while they admire the circle, Hartmut's voice comes over a magic tool where he announces that he serves the new Wob, and their duchy is about to be renamed Alexandria. They're witnessing a spell from the founding of the country, and he encourages all who can hear his voice to pray to the divine avatar Mestianora. He tells them it doesn't matter if they're commoners or nobles. They were all taught how to pray, so they strike their praying pose and shout praise to the gods. But nothing happens. It takes a few more times, but eventually, Hartmut yells at the nobles and tells them they should realize just how much mana this is using. Rosemine's life is on the line here, so pray like they mean it. Jiffy and his friends all know how she's not even from their duchy, and yet she's putting her life on the line for its people. That's a hell of a lot more than their previous Ob did. They give it their all, and that's when the magic circle finishes and returns to the city, where green light rains down on the duchy. Hey, it's over. They all go home and rest, excited to see what changes come tomorrow. So Jiffy wakes up earlier than usual and races out the door to be the first one to the ocean. That way he can secure a fresh catch for the new Ob. But rather than dirt outside his door, he actually feels grass under his feet. Wow, that's crazy. Down by the water, the murkiness that was there before is all cleared up, and the fish are literally jumping out just waiting to be caught. Her magic worked and revitalized the duchy before their eyes. The commoners are all in a tizzy, while thanking Rosemine through prayer. I like these three set of side stories in particular because they give us a ton of context. Anna Laura's gives us some nice perspective from her because she only knows some of the details. Also, she is the main character of the spin-off. Eglantines tells us a lot about her future plans and what we missed during that scene. And the last one told us what actually happened during the spell. But what comes next? Well, we won't find out until my next video, because we're going to wrap this one up with my final thoughts. This is the second to last volume in this entire series, and it basically wraps up the story. The big bad has been defeated, apprehended, had his memory searched, Veronica is locked in an ivory tower never to be heard from again, Georgine is dead, Detlind, Leonzio, pretty much anyone who's wronged Rosemine in any meaningful way is either dead or in jail. Even the royals who caused her such a headache are basically dissolved and under her boot. So what's left in this series? While the conflict is over and most of the post-war mess is resolved, Rosemine's still facing two major hurdles left to overcome: the divine mana that's killing her, and her missing memories. What's the importance of these? Honestly, they matter more than people give them credit for. The whole Goddess Died Mana and Memory Wipe arc come in at the tail end of this franchise. Like the memory thing is introduced at the end of the third to last volume, it only really has implications in this book, and then the Goddess Died Mana thing only affects Rosemine for the second half of this one. So what's the point in introducing these elements so late into the game? Admittedly, they seem haphazard on first read, but when looking at the series as a whole, they serve a very important purpose. These are the parts that connect us all the way back to the very first volume. Mine has always been on the verge of death, and she's missing some of the core memories that shaped her journey, to the point that even Ferdinand mentions how she's made so many uncharacteristic remarks over the course of this volume. The scary thing is, these don't even seem out of character until Ferdinand points them out. Like, right, Rosemine wouldn't say that. Because we're so embedded in her head and see her thought process, we don't even notice that she's thinking things contrary to her previous character development, because the gods of this world ripped those formative memories out of her. So why have that? Well, Rosemine's memory issues, again, link us back to the beginning of this story. This is our reminder of just how far she's come, and why what she learned all the way back in part 1 isn't just relevant, but a core aspect of who she is. Rosemine isn't just a girl pining for her lower city family, but someone who, without them, would basically have no attachment to this world. Hell, she can't even realize why Ferdinand is so important to her without that framework in place. So while this arc does come across as tacked on, I see what the author is going for, and honestly, dragging it out wouldn't really be a good idea. It serves its purpose well, in basically reminding us what mattered in this entire 33-volume story. We finally get the final stretch of Ferdinand's plan here. Giving the Grutricite was never really his end goal, just the bait to secure what he really wanted, which is sorta telling that Eglantine fell for it when he was criticizing Hildebrand for falling for Raubloot's trap last book. The bait obviously needs to be something they want, and the royals clearly want the Grutricite. But what Ferdinand needed wasn't just a royal, it was one who was willing to give their name to Rosemine to secure her future, as well as to act as a bargaining chip against the gods should they turn on her. By giving his and Eglantine's names, he ensured that Mestianora couldn't kill Rosemine, lest she kill everyone who could obtain the book with her. And in that same stroke, he made sure Rosemine would have the authority to not just resist, but actually demand beneficial royal decrees when she wants them. Because now, she has the current ruler of the country's name. Yes, this was all a means of control so Rosemine would have the ultimate authority in the country. And why is Ferdinand giving that to her? Because he knows that she won't abuse it. But more importantly, Rosemine's happiness is his in turn. This is something we'll see elaborated on next volume, but it's been long foreshadowed that he isn't exactly opposed to this union with Rosemine. And hell, even actively secured it through abuse of Trauerqual's previous decree. Despite him stepping down from power, and Ferdinand now having plenty of reason and ability to refuse it. So everything playing out is as he desires, which was hinted at in the last chapter. I was pretty impressed with Eglantine vowing to obtain the Book of Mestianora in her side story, as we know what happens when a person violates a magic contract, and one with the gods. Whether that cost is your life or not isn't known. We at least have stories about it costing divine protections and elements. She's taken her new role as Zent and Namesworn in stride, basically accepting Rosemine's role as her lady, but also embracing her role as an interim Zent. She knows she'll be a bridge to the next generation who will obtain a plethora of divine protections and books of Mestianora, but she's not just satisfied with overseeing that process, and actively wants to write the path Jürgen Schmidt is on. By vowing to the gods that she would also obtain a book, we know Eglantine isn't just paying lip service to her role as the future High Bishop, which fits with our initial introduction to her character when she asked Rosemine about entering the temple, all the way back at the start of part 4. It's a nice thematic throughline, especially now that we know how important the temple is and how it's going to change for the better. It's a very fitting role for Eglantine as the story wraps up. Yeah, there's no hiding it. What everyone's probably enjoying the most in this volume was how the royal family, and especially Sigiswald, getting humbled. Yeah, they all deserve the stern talking to they received from Rosemine, Ferdinand, and even Sylvester. The royals, despite being the workhorses of the country, have still been essentially doing as they pleased politically without putting in the work to fix their situation. There's only so much credit you can give them for dedicating mana endlessly, since they've had the path to the Grutricite laid out for them for a year at this point, and not a single one of them has even tried. Trauerqual is still a sympathetic dude, but even he gets his ass chewed out, showing that even if he was doing what he thought best to keep the country safe, he was still fucking with Ferdinand's life and almost got him killed. The issues facing this country all stem from the royals, but also aren't exactly their fault, at least not entirely. They are willfully ignorant, which isn't better. In fact, it's probably more frustrating, but they definitely need it brought down a peg here. It's especially nice to see that Adolfina, someone who didn't even want to marry Sigiswald, was able to escape her fate and have a shot as a Gieben Juanchel, actually gonna marry the scholar she worked with in her side story back home, as he was someone she had a much better rapport with, while also being the brother to her attendant. But now that the plot is basically wrapped up, I do feel somewhat bad for the royals as a whole, even if they are a cavalcade of fuck-ups. These people all suck at their jobs, and while it's pretty easy to just leave it at that, none of them would have been in a position of power before the Civil War. Remember that Traorqual was the 5th prince. He was being raised as a vassal to essentially make a branch family. He would have been managing some villa in the sovereignty, never to be heard from in an alternate reality without the Civil War. Sigiswald and Anastasius lacked the mana and elements to even be proper royals, and likely would have been married down in status to archducal families as political bargaining chips to keep duchies loyal. Well, had their father not needed to become Zent to keep the country afloat, Ralfrida, his first wife, is just from a middle duchy, and only put Raublut forward as the knight's commander because he was from her home. Magdalena was probably the most qualified to be in a position of power here, but let herself be blinded by love and took a backseat to be away from politics. She was so ill-informed on pretty much everything going on. So really, once you get the whole picture, the situation's a lot less cut and dry than they suck and should be punished. So that's it. We've wrapped up the penultimate volume of the series. We see how Jürgen Schmidt's future will be shaped, and Rosamund's life is in jeopardy once more. That can't happen too many more times, right? There's only one book left. So what's gonna happen? Closure. For now though, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with the link down in the description. If you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon. Or hey, click the link in the description to join my channel memberships and get some extra perks. Speaking of supporters, I'd like to give a special thanks to JMonth33A, Pokeflute, Robin DBL, Samuel Chen, Sazi, Tristan, and Vonstrom for their continued support. Thanks for watching.